Chapter 1032. Be careful. This guy's sorcery weapon has changed. Tan Lang adjusted his posture in midair and fired a healing chain at Long Aomin, bringing both of their life points back to 80%. Even if you told me to be careful, Brother Long replied, I have no idea what kind of effect his new weapon has. That was the truth. Facing a new weapon or skill, what could he possibly be careful of? You'll find out soon enough. At that moment, Feng Bujue finished his sentence. He leaped into the air and used body enhancement spell and Jeppo to catch up to Long Aomin. What's going on? Why did he target Brother Long first? At that second, Tan Lang's mind raced. With his analytical ability, he should have known the effect of Orichalcon's shield before the match. Shouldn't he target me first, who is weaker in defense? With that in mind, a very bad thought crossed Tan Lang's mind. Could it be he has already figured out how to counter Orichalcon's aura? Chi. The next second, the sound of wind breaking interrupted Tan Lang's train of thought. Both his and Long Aomin's expressions turned to shock and fear in that second. The stack of poker cards in Feng Bujue's hand shot out like a geyser. Instantly, thousands of poker cards shot out. The poker cards were like black feathers. They danced in the air and covered the sky within a 100-meter radius. What the? There are so many of them. Brother Long looked at the black poker cards in the sky and could not help but scream. Yes, there are so many of them. Feng Bujue replied. Then he used both of his hands to grab a black light card and swung them madly at Brother Long's shield. You want to use 2 cards to cut through the shield of God? At that moment, Brother Long was in a frenzy. He knew that he would not be able to outrun his opponent with speed alone, so he gritted his teeth and used Stone Skin and Rebirth to tank the attack. Why don't you give it a try? The effect of these 2 skills, one increased his defense, and the other gave him a small amount of life points when he was attacked. Both skills were skills that could last for 1 minute and 30 seconds respectively. They were very useful against high-speed attacks. But if that is the shield of God, after Feng Bujue saw the skill effect, he did not think much of it. Mine is the shield of demons. Xing. Before he could finish his sentence, Death Poker had already drawn black marks on Orichalcon's shield. Card assassination had the effect of, when using card weapons in close combat, speed, strength, and accuracy increased by 300%. It gave Brother Ju's every attack a great deal of damage. Even though Brother Long had activated his defensive skill, he could not break through Orichalcon's defense. Of course, even if his defense was broken through, Brother Long did not suffer too much damage. With the recovery effect of Rebirth, his life points decreased at a rate of 5% every 3 seconds. Good. You are indeed powerful. As Long Aomin parried, he added, but even if you have the upper hand in a one-on-one battle, don't forget that I have a teammate. Furthermore, didn't you say you wanted to end this as soon as possible? I don't think you can do that, right? Teammate? Feng Bujue replied with a chilling smile. You mean him? As he spoke, his eyes glanced to the side in the air. At that moment Long Aomin was afraid. He was afraid to turn his head in the direction that his brother Ju was looking at because he knew something that he did not want to see had happened there. Finally, amid Tan Lang's screams, Brother Long turned his head to look, and then he saw his teammate being torn into pieces by hundreds of cards that looked like they were alive. The scene was like a swarm of locusts eating crops or piranhas eating their prey. The cards that came from all directions could not be blocked or evaded. Tan Lang was instantly turned into white light. You! Long Aomin looked at his brother Ju, but he did not know what else to say. He and Tan Lang did not let their guard down, and they did not underestimate their enemy. They gave it their all, but they lost because of the simplest thing, power. Brother Long, we are old acquaintances, Feng Bujue said. I didn't lie to you when I said 100%, right? Ha! Hearing that, Long Aomin chuckled. Even though he had not been killed, He understood that when the black cards rushed at him, everything would be over. Orichalcum's shield would not be able to block this kind of attack that came from all directions. Brother Feng, you are different from when you were in room S1. 2 seconds later, Brother Long continued. In this competition, I can feel that you really want to win. Indeed. When Brother Ju replied, his hands did not stop attacking. Due to various reasons, I have to be more serious. Ha ha ha. Long Aomin laughed. But the competition that follows is not something that you can win just because you want to. No, I will continue to win. When Feng Bujua said that, black data flowed in his eyes. I will use my hands to open up the future, to get what I want to change this world. Objectively speaking, his speech was quite Chinibu, so many in the audience were excited when they heard it. You can't do that with just the title of champion, can you? Brother Long asked darkly. Ha! Brother Ju scoffed and replied with a hidden meaning. Brother Long, you and I both know. This is not just a game, right? When that was said, Long Aomin's expression shifted. However, before he could say anything, he was hit by the black cards that came from behind him. His body was quickly consumed and dissolved into light. On the other hand, outside of chaos, after the clock struck midnight, Xiao Ling held the translation of the spell that Xiao Tan had copied and the amulet in her other hand, and she started to chant. Li Ruoyu, on the other hand, was in charge of guarding in front of her, ready for battle. Although Dracula had retreated more than 10 meters away and stood there motionlessly, the players would not let down their guard before the ritual took effect. Current quest completed. All main quests completed. You have completed the scenario. Automatic teleportation in 180 seconds. At the last stage of the chanting, 2 system announcements suddenly appeared in Ruoyu and Xiaoling's ears. They understood immediately. Brother Ju had finished the battle with Blade. Like he said before he left, he would be able to deal with the enemy in 3 minutes after midnight. However, both of them chose to maintain their composure and maintain the status quo. Soon, Xiao Ling finished chanting the spell, and when she finished the last word, a black hole the size of a human eye appeared above the amulet. Now is the time. Quickly toss the amulet into chaos. Dracula was ready and yelled at the 2 players. Side quest completed. The system announced that all their quest lines in this scenario had been completed. At this point, the players had nothing to worry about. Xiao Ling glanced at Ruoyu, and the latter nodded. Therefore, Xiao Ling followed the Count's order, and tossed the amulet into the entrance of chaos that was pulsing with black energy. At that moment, a strange wave radiated from the entrance, and it caused a psychological impact on every living being in the space. Thankfully, the feeling was fleeting, and some of them did not even notice the change that had happened to the world. Thank you, travelers from another world. When Dracula said that, he knelt down on one knee and wrapped himself in the cape. His whole body started to shake. Now, if you do not wish to die, run as fast as you can. It was hard to say whether he wanted to say it or not, because before he could finish his sentence, Ruoyu and Xiao Ling had already started running. The expansion speed and gravity of the Hell's Door was indeed crazy. It not only expanded its radius to more than 5 meters in the blink of an eye, it also sucked in everything that it came into contact with. Thankfully, the 2 from Underworld Frontline had magic brooms in their hands, and they managed to cover a distance of more than 100 meters in a flash. At that moment, many of the audience members who were watching the game were confused. Ruoyu and Xiao Ling could have just teleported out of the scenario, so why did they have to run? Actually, the answer was simple. After experiencing so many things, they wanted to see whether Dracula's earlier long speech was true or not, and where this scenario world would go from here on out. O Purgatory! Witness my final power! The Count, who had maintained his composure throughout, roared, and his trembling body suddenly morphed and expanded into a giant monster that looked like a mixture of many demons. It seemed that everything he said was true. After revealing his true form as the Demon King, Dracula really took the initiative to jump into the border prison gate. He spread his limbs and released a shocking amount of demonic energy, suppressing the expansion of the gate. What he needed to do was to hold on for a while until the space fissure formed by the interweaving of chaos and holiness expanded to a size larger than the Hell's Gate. By then, the Hell's Gate would no longer be able to reverse the gap, and the Count, as he said, if he was lucky, he could still retreat into purgatory. Bang 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 bang, the space fissure did not disappoint. It expanded faster than the Count expected. It looked like it would take less than a minute for it to exceed the size of the Hell's Door. But the development of things had indeed far exceeded Dracula's expectations. Even though he was one of the most powerful demon kings in Hell, before the power of the entire dimension, he was like an ant. He was like an ant trying to shake a tree. He was in great pain and was unable to completely stop the expansion of the Hell's Door. Ugh, this! 30 seconds later, Dracula was forced back into his human form. He was bleeding from his 7 orifices, and his whole body was trembling. Could it be that I can't escape this reincarnation? At this moment, suddenly, ugh! A low groan sounded, and a figure appeared beside the Count. You! The Count did not turn his head, but he already knew who it was. The mummy could not speak. He just silently contributed his own strength and grabbed the edge of the Hell's Door. Then, a second and third figure appeared. The werewolf and the Gillman also appeared from the vortex of Hell and pulled the edge of the black hole together with the Count. After another 2 seconds, Frankenstein also came to the door and joined them, without saying a word. You! The Count's pressure suddenly lessened a lot. He seemed to be able to hold on, but he still said with a bitter smile, "Old friends, you might disappear because of this." Indeed, each of these classic monsters in the old movies possessed considerable strength. However, even if the 5 monsters worked together, they could only stop the expansion of the Hell's Door, and each of their energy was rapidly depleting. Seeing that the comparison between the space-time crack and the Hell's Door was about to reverse, the monsters had reached their limit. Just when they thought there was nothing they could do, I didn't expect. Another voice sounded from the Hell's Door. There would be such a day. The person who spoke was a middle-aged man with a beard in a white shirt and black vest. His name was Van Helsing. I am actually standing beside you. Van Helsing became the 6th person to come to the door, joining Dracula and the others. Now, he was naturally a ghost who had wandered in Hell for 100 years. Ha! The Count laughed. I just did what I should do and what I can do. This was what Van Helsing said to him a century ago. Today, Dracula finally understood Van Helsing's state of mind at that time. Van Helsing was silent for half a second before saying, "Let us," the Count continued, "end all of this." Several seconds later, the space-time crack finally exceeded the boundary of the Hell's Door and started to devour the Hell's Door's power. The 6 figures in the Hell's Door also retreated after a simple exchange and were sucked into the vortex of the Hell's Door. Seeing this, Ruo Yu and Xiao Ling chose to leave the scenario because they believed that the plot was about to end. If they continued, it would probably be the collapse of the Hell's Door. Sure enough, after they turned into light and left, the 2 forces that transcended space-time were like 2 violent beasts. They started to fight in this land of oblivion, and the victor was decided in an instant. In the end, only a tiny black dot remained in the air. In an instant, it released a collapsing force that was 100 times stronger than the 2 doors, and in a matter of seconds, the entire castle was sucked into it. 15 seconds later, in a primitive world formed by data streams, Feng Bujue opened his eyes. Yes, he did not teleport. He stayed in the Hell's Door until the very last second. Therefore, he came here. How is this possible? At that moment, not far from Feng Bujue, there was a figure standing. When he saw his brother Ju, he was shocked. The person looked about 30 years old and had a head of white hair that reached his neck. His head had normal human skin and appearance, but below his neck, there was a mercury-like material. It was like liquid metal that had just solidified. Even though there was an outline, there were no details. Infinite. Feng Bujue called out the person's name directly. Our last conversation didn't end, right? Without waiting for the other person to answer, he continued. The second way to kill you that you didn't say. I have a rough idea. He paused. Is it through formatting and erasing you at the server level? Chapter 1033. That is correct. Due to the existence of Special Plan F, Infinite had to answer Brother Ju's question truthfully. I believe many of the audience have already forgotten about this setting, so I have decided to explain it again to save everyone the trouble of flipping through the previous chapters. The so-called Special Plan F was a set of codes that Zero had secretly implanted into Infinite's body. This happened not long after S1 ended. Under Woody's direct order, Zero abandoned part of his power and infiltrated the space-time data transmission layer to complete this. At the time, Infinite had not fully formed, so he had no recollection of this, and the effect of Special Plan F was to prevent Infinite from lying to Feng Bujue, to prevent him from attacking Feng Bujue, and to prevent him from revealing known information to Feng Bujue. At first glance, this plan appeared to be helping Feng Bujue, but in reality, it was used by Woody to protect Infinite. It was because of this plan that Infinite avoided contact with Brother Ju. According to Woody's original plan, Infinite should have consumed loot during the Ragnarok event. Infinite's original design was based on loot, and thus complete his final evolution. However, no one would have thought that Feng Bujue had entered the data layer through a space-time rift in a scenario, and within 15 seconds, he had arrived at Infinite's location. Very good. After Feng Bujue received the other's response, he asked, Then, with my current power, can I complete this operation? Infinite did not answer this question because before Brother Ju finished, he had already slipped away. As one of the strongest anomalies, his mobility in the world of data was very impressive. In an instant, Infinite morphed into a stream of light and disappeared. 3 seconds later, on the other side of the space-time data transmission layer, Infinite's figure once again condensed at this place. The process of reassembling was similar to a data puzzle. Streams of light rapidly converged, forming a rough whole. Then, the pixels on his appearance increased at a uniform speed, and his figure became clearer from blurry. Answer my question. The next second, the scary thing happened again, to Infinite. Feng Bujue's voice came again from not far away. Infinite turned his head and saw the calm Brother Ju, and he could not help but reply, Yes, with your current power, you can complete this operation. Tell me the exact method, Feng Bujue quickly said. And Infinite ran away again. This time, the escape time was still 3 seconds. It looked like this was the shortest time for Infinite to perform a warp in the data layer. Why are you running? But Feng Bujue followed him like a shadow, appearing at a new location almost at the same time. Speak. First. Infinite's expression was very tense and heavy, but he could not control the words that came out of his mouth. Destroy my body's structure, and observe the pattern of the data during the process of my recovery and reassembly, thus locking onto my original code. After he answered this, he ran again. Another 3 seconds later, the two of them changed locations again, but the situation did not change. Continue, Feng Bujue said again. Second. Infinite continued. Use Chuck Norris's autobiography to analyze my original code. This time, he did not run, because he realized that moving would not solve the problem. Third crack. So, Infinite tore his chin. Heh. That's a good idea, Feng Bujue laughed, but with your self-healing ability, this level of injury, before he could finish his sentence, his opponent's chin had already recovered. But Infinite immediately repeated the action of tearing his chin, destroying his speech organ for the second time. All right. To let the conversation progress. Feng Bujua shook his head and said, "How about this? I won't ask you that question for now, and you can stop this self-harming behavior. How about that?" Hearing this, Infinite quietly waited for his chin to recover for the second time, and then said, "Sure." He was not afraid that Brother Jew was tricking him. After all, as long as he was willing, he could destroy his mouth again in half a second. "How did you find me?" This time, Infinite asked a question before Brother Jew could. "Analyze it yourself," Feng Bujua replied without even thinking about it. "Are you trying to test my logic circuit?" Infinite muttered. No worries." He was silent for 3 seconds and then said, "I understand. When I scanned you last time, even though I was not infected by the virus you carried, you used it to leave a code similar to a tracking beacon on my body, heh?" For 3 seconds. Feng Bujua heard this, and then said in a mocking tone, "Far inferior to me. If what you said is true, then that's strange." Infinite said in a low voice, "Even if the human brain's usage rate has increased in this dimension, your ability has already far exceeded the range of a normal person. Other than that, you can actually use the same method as me to move through the data layer. These signs all show that I already possess part of the characteristics of an anomaly." Brother Jew interrupted him, and finished what Infinite was about to say. Then he spread out his hands and said, "All right. I have a rough idea of what's going on with your logic circuit. With Ed and Link's level, to be able to create an existence like you is indeed a breakthrough." He paused for half a second. "Of course, to me, it's just that." Whatever you say." Infinite's expression and tone showed that he was not happy with Brother Jew's words and actions. Different from the last time they met at the matchless combat arena, the current Infinite had an obvious change in personality. After all, one of his 2 designers was Link, who considered himself a gentleman. This guy placed a lot of importance on the personality simulation program. Therefore, as the degree of evolution increased, Infinite's personality would also become more and more distinct. "Right." At this time, Feng Bujua suddenly asked, "Have you already gotten Ed and Link out of Pi's labyrinth?" He asked the question very quickly, and Infinite's hand was also very fast. When he finished, the latter's chin was torn off again. "Oh, that means they have already come out." Feng Bujua looked at him mockingly and laughed. "You see, sometimes it's the same even if you don't say anything. If you didn't save them, you wouldn't have to hide anything, right?" After saying that, Brother Jew took out Chuck Norris's razor from his inventory and said slowly, "Unfortunately, their exact coordinates, if I don't hear it from you personally, I won't know." He raised the razor. "So I'd better finish the first 2 steps you mentioned earlier." As Feng Bujua said that, he flipped the razor's switch. But just as he was about to shave his head, suddenly Infinite moved again, and after he disappeared this time, Brother Jew could no longer sense the existence of the beacon. "It's similar to what I expected." 2 seconds later, Feng Bujua calmly turned off the razor and said, after analyzing the beacon, he immediately corrected the calculation mechanism of all his programs, and then used a new algorithm to perform an emergency self-check. At the same time, he used verbal communication to test my intelligence. He tapped his forehead with his finger. After completing the inspection of the beacon, he didn't immediately move, but continued to talk to me quietly. He wanted to gather more information about me, until I suddenly asked him a question, and showed my killing intent. Then he deleted the beacon and instantly fled. Brother Jew crossed his arms in front of his chest and took a few steps with his head down. "Based on the inspection time, his execution speed is quite shocking. Then why did you purposely let him go?" At that moment, a voice suddenly came from Feng Bujua's side. He turned his head toward the voice, and what entered his sight was a fair-skinned beauty wearing a black leather bodysuit. "Looks like I'm not the only one who knows how to leave a beacon on others." The moment Feng Bujue saw 23, he had already thought of many things. From this point, it could be seen that Brother Ju was not lying. His reasoning speed was indeed much faster than infinite. Let me guess. You secretly left it on me when we were at Harem City, right? Feng Bujue asked. That's right. 23 answered honestly. That way, as long as you enter the data world outside the scenario, I will be able to sense your coordinates. Oh. Feng Bujue said. Then, you've been watching from the dark? Yes. 23 nodded in confirmation and then said, If I'm not mistaken, you never planned to kill him. Not necessarily. Feng Bujue shrugged. If everything went smoothly and he told me everything I wanted to know, I wouldn't mind killing him. But the chance of that happening is very small. 23 added. Haha. Life doesn't always go our way. Feng Bujue said with a smile, so I've prepared that most likely countermeasure. As he spoke, he put away the razor. Letting him go is naturally part of this countermeasure. I don't understand. 23 thought about it and said, Based on my observation, the result of your test earlier is that the beacon you left on him has been removed, and you've already alerted the enemy. In that case, you won't be able to control what he will do next, right? Yes, that's the effect I want. Feng Bujue answered calmly. Hearing that, something seemed to flash across 23's eyes. So that's how it is, what? Brother Ju asked. Aren't you going to ask for the reason? There's no need. 23 replied. Since you said that, it means that everything is within your calculations. I only need to know this point. Oh. Feng Bujue answered casually and then asked, Then, the reason you're here this time is to tell me that you've been following me? 23's expression changed slightly. After hesitating for a moment, he replied, Just treat it as, I came to see a friend. No, you didn't just come to see a friend. Feng Bujue shook his head. You have something else to say. 23 and Brother Ju looked at each other. His expression became very complicated. I have a question to ask you, at the same time, in the inner world, in the void domain. A stream of light flashed out of nowhere, and then a figure appeared out of nowhere. 2 seconds later, along with bursts of heat, Infinite's figure appeared in front of Ed and Link. Link's appearance was the same as before. He had the appearance of a white man around 40 years old. He had neat sideburns and a clean, white face. He was wearing a black tuxedo and a pair of shiny leather shoes. He had gloves, a bow tie, a top hat, and a cane in his right hand. And Ed was very different from the last time he appeared. Last time, when he appeared in LJN Theme Park, he was wearing a normal black shirt and pants, but his head was in the state of a liquid silver ball. He was even ridiculed by Loot as a slime. As for the current Aida, he had completely changed his appearance, becoming a white, three-dimensional little person in a toilet. Yes, you did not see it wrong. It was a toilet man. It was the human symbol that one would see on the door of the male toilet when one went to the public toilet. His head was round and was separated from his neck. His body was made up of the simplest and thickest lines. Of course, in the world of anomalies, he was not that ugly. Their aesthetic was different from humans. Other than a few exceptions like Link, most of the anomalies did not care about their appearance and would not purposely rewrite the relevant code. Oh, what happened to you? Link saw Infinite and raised both his hands to make a shocked expression. It's just an overload. It's not a big deal, Infinite said as he lowered his head to look at his half-solidified and unstable body. The temporarily rewritten sequence had some errors after moving a long distance. I've already rewritten it and fixed it. Then, Ed's voice came out from his round white head. What is the reason for your current sorry state? Infinite replied, Feng Bujue entered the space-time data transmission layer and found me. What? Link's expression changed. You didn't say anything, right? Don't worry, I did not mention a word about the Twilight of the Gods plan, Infinite replied. But he knows that you have already escaped from Pai's maze. Link mumbled. That's good. Other than that, the main reason I came to find the two of you is to tell you. Infinite quickly continued. From Feng Bujue's body, I noticed some phenomena. Chapter 1034. November 13th, in the morning. Yo, you're up. When Feng Bujue came back from his morning run, Ruoyu happened to be cleaning up the living room. Not long after Ruoyu moved in, the two agreed to take turns doing the housework. However, the agreement was one thing. In fact, Ruoyu did more work. After all, girls liked to be clean. Most of the time, she would clean up when she couldn't stand it anymore. I've been up for a while. After hearing Brother Ju's words, Ruoyu continued what she was doing and replied without looking up. I was waiting for you to bring breakfast back. Haha. Feng Bujue laughed. We're eating soup dumplings today. Be careful. There was a reason why he laughed so cheekily. Everyone had one or two things that they weren't good at. For example, Brother Ju wasn't good at tying knots, Xiao Tan wasn't good at lying, and Ruoyu, she wasn't very good at using chopsticks. Of course, not very good at using chopsticks didn't mean that she couldn't pick up food. It was just that Ruoyu didn't learn the correct way to hold chopsticks when she was young, so her chopstick skills were slightly worse than ordinary people's. She didn't have a problem using them normally, but once she encountered tofu, fish balls, and other food that were slippery or easy to fall apart, and things like soup dumplings that were very thin and had soup inside, she would often embarrass herself. In fact, this wasn't a big problem. In a sense, it was still cute. However, when you showed a weakness in front of a cheap person like Feng Bujue, malicious ridicule and teasing were inevitable. Who was our Brother Ju? If there was a competition in this world where people fought over food with chopsticks, he would be at least one of the top 10 in the world. When he was a student, as long as he wanted to, he could make his classmates who shared a table with him unable to eat a bite of meat. There was even someone who fought with him in the situation where he used chopsticks to snatch a drumstick in the end. With such a sense of superiority, how could he not repeatedly complain about this matter? Careful of what? Ruoyu immediately glared at her Brother Ju. Isn't it just a soup dumpling? I'll just break it and let the gravy flow out. That's a pity. Isn't soup dumplings just a mouthful of broth? Feng Bujue revealed a sinister smile. Why don't I feed it? You're overthinking it. Ruoyu interrupted him before he could finish. I've never been fed by anyone since I can remember. So you're already 22 and you still don't know how to use chopsticks? Brother Ju replied. What right does a 24-year-old man who can't even tie his shoelaces have to say that about me? Ruoyu's sarcasm skills had improved, and she was on par with her Brother Ju when it came to sarcasm. Hee. Feng Bujue laughed even more wretchedly. I don't mind if you help me tie it. I see. Ruoyu snorted. How about we make a bet? Oh? What kind of bet? Brother Ju was also interested. 1 week. I'll practice chopsticks, and you'll practice tying knots. Ruoyu continued. After a week, I promise that I can pick up anything that you can pick up safely, but you have to promise that you can tie the knots that I know how to tie. At this moment, Feng Bujue was a little scared. Are you scared? Ruoyu asked. Ha! Brother Ju laughed dryly. I almost forgot how to spell the word scared. He forced himself to look confident. Let's make a bet. What do you want to bet? As soon as he finished speaking, he immediately said, Oh, let me make it clear in advance. I have to consider requests like rolling in the sheet. I'm a righteous person. In the next second, before Ruoyu could say anything, Arthas, who was lying on the sofa, complained, During those years in hell, Meow, I've heard and seen many shameless words and deeds, but within the scope of my knowledge, you're the only one who can perfectly mix shameless and cheap, Meow. When Ruoyu heard this, she looked at Arthas expressionlessly. I say, no matter what, he's still my boyfriend. Don't you think I have bad taste when you talk about him like that? No. This isn't a matter of bad taste, Meow. Arthas replied. It's fine if you only look at his face, but you still chose to date Feng Bujue after understanding his personality. I can only say that you're a weirdo. She paused and scratched the back of her neck with her claws. Speaking of which, you're really a weirdo, Meow. When Ruoyu heard this, she thought for a moment. Then, the bet is, hey. Brother Ju couldn't help but shout. You're suddenly changing the topic. Ruoyu ignored him and continued, this bet? If I win, unless I'm in a good mood and want to intervene, otherwise, from now on, all the housework will be done by you. Whoa, what does from now on mean? Feng Bujue replied. If we get married in the future, wouldn't I have a few decades of labor in advance? If you don't dare to bet, just say it, Ruoyu said. TSK. Feng Bujue raised his eyebrows. Then, what if you lose? From now on, I'll tie your shoelaces, Ruoyu replied. Okay. You said it, Feng Bujue said loudly. Yes, I said it, Ruoyu replied calmly. After pausing for a second, the two said in unison, it's a deal. Sigh. Arthas sighed and shook her head. What two weirdos, Meow. A few hours later, at 10 o'clock in the morning, Feng Bujue's login lobby. Who would believe that you're organizing your stuff in the login lobby alone? Brother Ju began to complain as soon as he stepped into the elevator. Actually, you want to secretly learn how to use chopsticks in the game world. You're probably searching for related videos on the touchscreen right now. As he muttered, he shamelessly opened a search engine page on the touchscreen and typed in the words, how to tie a knot. For the next hour, he used unprecedented concentration and enthusiasm to study knot tying technique. Even though he had told Rainey that he was going online to gather information about the competition, the truth was that the two of them were doing the same thing. An hour had passed without him noticing. After looking at a large number of pictures and tutorials, Feng Bujue closed all the websites, took 2 steps back, opened his arms, and shouted to the sky like the main character in The Shawshank Redemption when he regained his freedom. It's so hard. Again, everyone has 1 or 2 things that they're not good at. To make a long story short, Brother Ju finally opened the Dream Company's official website and forum to look for information about the competition. At this time, the top 8 of the tournament for the best S2 had been released. The names of the 8 teams were placed in the most prominent position on the homepage of the official website. The 8 teams were Regulation, Brahmin, Jianghu, Red Sakura, Warring States, Frontline of Hell, Trash Alliance, and Mountain River. Since there were no 2 teams from the same studio that entered the top 8, and there was no second team that entered the top 8, the teams with first team in their names were omitted from the list. Overall, 6 of the 8 teams were professional teams with studios as their background, and the other 2 teams were formed by individual players. This result was far beyond the expectations of the audience and various intelligence analysis teams. In a team competitive game, a professional team had a huge advantage. A professional team had the resources of an entire studio. Whether it was the coordination of personnel, the gathering of items, or the gathering of information before the competition, they were much better than the wild players. For example, Trash Alliance was a team made up of 4 professional players. Actually, it couldn't be considered a professional team. The so-called professional team didn't just consist of a few professional players. Other than the players, there were many other people who contributed to the team's victory. It was just that these people's work was carried out outside of the competition, so the audience would usually ignore their existence. However, in this year's tournament for the best S2, under the circumstances of a team competition where there was almost no chance of luck, there were still 2 teams from non-gaming studios that made it into the top 8. This result once again made the leaders of the major studios realize that they could not view Thriller Paradise the same way they viewed normal online games. After Feng Bujue saw the list, he narrowed his eyes and said, "At first glance, none of the teams are easy to deal with." He was not wrong, but when he saw the list, he was not surprised because when he saw the matchups for the top 16, he had already predicted which 8 teams would advance to the next round. The problem now was, how would these 8 teams be matched up? One more win and we'll enter the final. Brother Ju browsed through the website as he read. The final will be a competition between 4 teams, so there will be many variables. Normally speaking, the more variables there are, the more chances the weaker team will have. His eyes moved slightly and stopped at the word regulation. Using this mechanism for the final seems to be to take care of the teams that are not regulation. He paused. Not only will they have to fight one less round, it will also increase the chance of them beating the strongest team on the surface. With that in mind, Feng Bujue scanned through every single piece of information on the front page of the official website. Basically, they were all news articles that he could read with just a glance at the headlines. Therefore, he quickly opened the gaming forum to see what he could find there. Just as he opened the forum, Brother Ju was attracted by a hot post of the day that was pinned at the top. The title of the post was Analysis of all the matchups in the semifinals and the prediction of victory and defeat. Feng Bujue clicked on the post and read it. He laughed. So, the forum is very helpful. This post lists all the information that I need to do mental calculations, which saves me a lot of trouble. This way, I can easily store the list in my mind through graphical memory. Then, Feng Bujue ignored the part about the outcome of the match and quickly memorized all the matchup possibilities provided by the other party, including the 28 single matchup combinations and the 105 complete matchup. After confirming that there were no mistakes, he closed the thread. Then, he opened each of the discussion forums and filtered the information at an extremely fast speed, flipping through the posts page by page. Given the popularity of the tournament for the best, the number of posts on the forum was imaginable. Even though it was a weekday morning and the forum had various mechanisms to filter out spam posts, the number of posts in each discussion forum was increasing at a rate of 1 post per minute. Oh, that's interesting. Suddenly, Brother Ju's eyes stopped on a post with a very eye-catching title, The Past and Present Life of the Super 8 Trash Alliance. To be honest, the team that Feng Bujue did not want to face at this stage was the Trash Alliance. This was because, out of the 7 teams that could potentially become his opponents, Brother Ju knew the least about this team. Of course, this was also because of Hong Hu's plan. As expected of a strategist, he used a strategy similar to Underworld Frontline in the preliminaries and turned on the privacy option. Furthermore, the players in their team were very strong. Most of the time, they achieved victory before their opponents could even figure out what was going on. This caused the video of their matches and the information revealed by the video to be very limited. For a man like Feng Bujue, who had already calculated more than 70% of the factors that would determine the outcome of the match before the battle, the lack of information was a very bad thing. This was especially true when he knew that his opponents were strong but did not know how strong they were. This made him feel like there was a fishbone stuck in his throat and he could not sit still. In comparison, if he were to face a professional team, he would have a much easier time. Even if he were to face regulation or gods, it would be the same. After all, most of their information was already an open secret. As long as he had enough data, even if it was a god, Brother Ju would be able to plot against them. Let me take a look. Feng Bujue clicked open the post and realized that it was a long post, and the font was a bright purple that would blind the eyes of the readers. He grumbled, "This person is trying to take revenge on society, isn't he? He's trying to force the durability of the reader's eyes to drop to 0, talking was talking, reading was reading." Feng Bujue stared at the unbearable font and read the entire article with the intention of finding out more information. Then, "This is a scam. He really wanted to throw a cup or something, but unfortunately, he did not have anything in his hands. What is this? No wonder the title has a paparazzi style. It's all gossip. What's so interesting about Uncle Trash being in a male idol group in Korea when he was young? Now, he's just an uncle with a pair of sunglasses. Just as Brother Jew was complaining loudly and fiercely, suddenly, a small icon popped up in his social tab. This was a notification that would only appear when a friend sent a message. Seeing this, Fong Bujue opened it without hesitation. He did not expect. The person who sent the message was. Chapter 1035. 5 minutes later, inside a team survival mode scenario. After listening to the plot introduction, Fong Bujue, Long Aomin, 7 kills, defeating armies, and Tan Lang, the 4 members of Blade Edge, were transported to the same location. So, what is going on? Once they stopped, Fong Bujue opened his mouth to ask, "Why do we have to talk about this in the scenario? Can't we talk about it in the meeting room?" "I'm afraid that won't do." Suddenly, a rather familiar voice came from the side to answer Brother Jew. The moment he heard the voice, Fong Bujue's expression shifted. No way. He turned toward the voice and saw Gu Chen, the section chief of the 9 sections, looked exactly the same in the game world as he did in real life. He looked to be in his 30s, with a handsome face and a lazy demeanor. Even his suit and tie were the same as in real life. Ah, so bright. After staring at Gu Chen for 2 seconds, Brother Jew suddenly used his arm to cover his eyes and pretended to yell, "I can't take it anymore. Your data is so bright. I can't look at it directly." "Then why don't you gouge out your own eyes first? We'll continue our conversation after that." Gu Chen was immune to this kind of prank, so he was as calm as ever. Fong Bujue immediately stopped his act and said seriously, "I suddenly feel like I've gotten used to this kind of brightness. This is the first time you've seen this kind of data flow, right?" Gu Chen did not comment on Brother Jew's behavior and just asked his own question. "Yes." Brother Jew studied the man as he replied, "By the way, what is this? A Super GM account?" The answer Gu Chen gave was both unexpected and reasonable. You can customize your appearance and give orders to the system. You can force yourself to enter and exit the scenario. Your level is set at 999. Your life points, stamina points, and sorcery points are all positive. Your item and skill bar are also unlimited. No wonder. Fong Bujue stroked his chin and said, "It was a 5-man dungeon, but a 6th player appeared. By the way, the GM's character data is not stored in the same file as the players. After the GM's character leaves the scenario, there is no login lobby that the GM's character can enter. Therefore, the GM can only appear in the scenario world or the Dream Company's personal game dimension," Gu Chen added. His words answered Brother Jew's initial question. "I see." Brother Jew nodded and then asked, "Then? I wonder what is the purpose of your visit, Section Chief?" "It's nothing important. I'm just here to greet both of you," Gu Chen replied. "It's more convenient for me to say some things." Then, he turned to Brother Jew and used his hand to point at the 4 people from Blade Group. "I know you've found out through your investigation that Blade Group is one of the 9 sections. You don't need to test them anymore. I'll be frank. These 4 are the investigators from my department on the internet." Then, Gu Chen turned to look at the 4 people from Blade Group and used his hand to point at Fong Bujue. "This person, on the surface, is a novelist, but in reality, he is an unstable factor that the country has been keeping an eye on." After saying that, without waiting for a reply, he turned his face back to Brother Jew and continued, "For the sake of safety, I have to hide the identity of my subordinates in real life. I hope you will stop there and not investigate further into this." He paused for a moment. "If you don't listen to my advice and insist on doing things your own way, then the final result may be One day, the 9 sections will kill all 4 of them in order to eliminate any potential threat. Normally, there was no need to say anything more. However, Gu Chen added, then, push all the blame of their deaths onto you. Attach a large amount of personal information about you, and inform their families and comrades at the same time. After hearing this, not only Feng Bujue, but even Brother Long and the others looked at Gu Chen with a look that said, "Are you King kidding me?" As for Mr. Feng Bujue, 2 seconds later, Gu Chen looked at his subordinates and continued, considering that his danger level in real life is very, very, very high. It's so high that it's beyond the scope of your supervision. You don't have to worry too much about him. He paused for half a second and intentionally glanced at Brother Bujue. A sinister smile appeared on his face. After all, there are already people in charge of monitoring him. If everything goes well, the rest of his life and his descendants won't be able to escape the clutches of the 9 sections. The chief is wise. The chief is wise. The chief's plan is flawless. The chief has great foresight. The 4 men of Daofeng all looked at Gu Chen with respect. Their attitude could be said to be submissive. Although the chief had used the term clutches of the 9 sections to describe the organization he was in charge of, Brother Long and the others didn't find it strange at all, to put it simply. Gu Chen felt that he had said enough, so he used the usual concluding tone he used during meetings and said loudly, "In the future, both of you should continue to do your own things. If you have the conditions, help each other. If you don't cause trouble for each other." Speaking up to this point, he actually took out a coffee pot that was exactly the same as the one he used in real life. He unscrewed the lid and poured himself a cup of coffee. Phew! After blowing on the coffee and taking a sip, Gu Chen opened his mouth again and asked, "Do you have any other questions?" "I do." Before Gu Chen could finish, Feng Bujue roared. As expected, Gu Chen replied calmly and rolled his eyes. Feng Bujue took a step forward. With his hands on his hips, he raised his head and glared at Feng Yen. "What do you mean by the rest of my life and my descendants won't be able to escape the clutches of the 9 sections? You better explain yourself." Pajuan, Greedy Wolf, 7 kills, Long Aomin. Hearing this, Gu Chen called out to the 4 men without turning his head. "Yes, sir." The 4 men replied in unison. "Retreat." Gu Chen's order was concise. "Yes, sir." The 4 men's reaction was the same, and they were very decisive. Even with the system's punishment, they retreated without hesitation. In an instant they turned into 4 rays of white light. After they left, Gu Chen turned to Feng Bujue and said, "Feng Bujue, you has been staying at your place for quite some time now, hasn't she?" "Yes, why?" Feng Bujue replied. "I've already told my brother-in-law and his wife, who are Ruoyu's grandparents, about this situation," Gu Chen continued. "Oh, so what?" Feng Bujue continued. "Let me give you a brief introduction. Those 2 men are 2 of the 10 strongest spiritual ability users in the world right now, and both of them have the personality of a naughty child," Gu Chen replied slowly. Gu Chen replied unhurriedly. "As for me, I've successfully caused them to have some subtle misunderstandings about your relationship with Ruoyu. In other words, there are 2 paths that you can take in your future. The first is to become my relative. At that time, we'll be one big family. We'll have a meal together during festivals, and you'll have plenty of benefits if you call me Grandpa. Let's not talk about money and power. I'll even give you a nuclear weapon as a red packet. If you don't like anyone in Asia, just say the word, and I'll make sure that they'll disappear from this planet before the Earth completes its next rotation." As he said that, he took another sip of coffee and continued. "As for the second path, if you really want to choose, that's fine too. However, I don't know what will happen. In any case, it'll be suicide." Chapter 1036. November 14th, 8 a.m. The most anticipated matchup in the history of Thriller Paradise was finally announced. In the nearly 30 hours before the list was released, the intelligence and analysis departments of the major studios had already calculated all the possible matchup. Other than Underworld Frontline and Trash Alliance, the teams behind the other 6 teams had already prepared all 7 battle strategies. They were just waiting for the announcement to be made before handing out a copy to the members. The final matchups were as follows: Regulation vs. Brahmin, Warring States vs. Mountain River, Trash Alliance vs. Jianghu, Underworld Frontline vs. Red Sakura. I believe the readers who are reading this chapter will be surprised when they see the matchups, but after the surprise, you might have guessed something. Yes, this is a conspiracy. As the author, I forcefully placed Order and Gods, 2 teams that everyone thought would enter the finals together to create a reading experience similar to What the F***ck. This was the power of God. Alright, this chapter is not the beginning of the month, so please treat the content seriously. We will not talk about the format of the semifinals. There is one thing that needs to be explained first, and that is, Dream Company has changed the time of the semifinals. According to the official website, to allow the audience to see the live stream of each semifinal, the time of the 4 matches will be staggered. In other words, for the 4 matches, there would be a first and a last. The next match would only start after the first one was over. Of course, regarding the players' online time limit, Dream Company had prepared the corresponding solution. They would communicate with the person in charge of the 8 teams, usually the team leader, within 12 hours to confirm and coordinate the players' online time. Then, at midnight on the 15th, Dream Company would remove the online time limit for all the members of the 8 teams until the match ended. This was actually quite difficult to execute. The main problem was the negotiation. If a team under Zombie Blade had entered the top 8, they would have used this opportunity to create a ruckus and try to find a way to gain some benefit. Unfortunately, their 2 teams, and even their bosses, had all been taken care of by Brother Jew. As for the 6 pro teams that had successfully entered the top 8, although it was not that they did not play any tricks, they would not go as far as Zombie Blade. Therefore, the negotiation went smoothly. Basically, before noon on the 14th, the 6 gaming studios had finished their negotiation with the game company. The remaining teams were Trash Alliance and Underworld Frontline. Uncle Trash appeared to be a very easygoing person. After receiving the online communication from Dream Company and hearing the description, he replied without even thinking, "Do whatever you want." After the call, "Do you want me to give you a good review?" This kind of self-abandonment touched the customer service to the point of tears, or perhaps tears of pity. In any case, the negotiation with Trash Alliance was the smoothest. But Underworld Frontline, Fong Bujue's reaction was quite surprising. Dream Incorporated thought that Brother Jew would say something like, "I am invincible before any rules," or something along those lines, but Brother Jew was different. But to their surprise, after Fong Bujua listened to the arrangement, he made a request. His request was to put Underworld Frontline in the first match. The customer service manager who was responsible for communicating with Fong Bujua. They did not dare allow their employees to communicate with Brother Jew for fear of being scammed, heard this request. His first reaction was, "Is this some kind of competition strategy?" But he was wrong. Fong Bujua then came up with a valid reason. "None of our members are professional players. A few of them are busy during the day. If we are put into the last 2 matches, and the first few matches take a long time, it might affect their work. This kind of pressure from real life will no doubt affect their performance during the match." Indeed, Underworld Frontline was the only team that was made up of non-professional players. From the perspective of the situation, this request was quite reasonable. Therefore, Dream Company quickly relayed Fong Bujua's request and reason to the managers of the other 6 teams. After they all nodded, they contacted Red Cherry, who was directly related to this matter, and then something dramatic happened. The team leader, Su Huaishang, agreed to this without consulting the upper management of the studio. Even though this move did not have much effect at the time, but it was a foreshadowing of something that would happen later. November 15th, midnight. The semi-finals of tournament for the Best S2, Battle of the Four Worlds, had begun. The first match of the night was between Hell Frontline U and Red Cherry. Feng Bujue, level 50-inch Wang Tanji, level 50 Rain Like Rain, level 50 Laughing Soul, level 50 Flower on the Rock, level 50. Please select the game mode that your team wishes to join. You have selected tournament for the Best S2, Battle of the Four Worlds. Please confirm. Confirmed. Please select the spectator for this match. Confirmed. Your team has entered the queue. We are waiting for your opponent. Matching complete. Coordinating nerve connection. Generating scenario downloading. Please wait a moment. The smoke of war has just been settled, and the blood is still fresh. The battle rises again, and the people do not wait. The stars gather in the four worlds, and the battle is over the clouds. Download complete. Welcome to tournament for the Best S2 Battle of the Four Worlds. This mode provides a scenario introduction, and there is a chance of triggering hidden side missions and special world building. Reward for winning the scenario: advance to the finals. The scenario introduction will be played soon. After that, the match will start. This time, Feng Bujue chose to spectate. Xiaoling. Yes, they were not mistaken. In the semifinals, he made the only marksman in his team sit on the bench. When the audience saw the lineup for Underworld Frontline, they were all stunned. Throughout Brother Ju's team's journey to the finals, Gu Xiaoling was the only member who had never been substituted. She could be said to be the main force of the team. But it was such a member who had become a spectator in a match that would decide whether or not they would advance to the finals. Chapter 1037. Waning autumn, withered leaves everywhere. Waning sunset, crimson clouds fill the sky. In this waning scene, a group of people on horseback arrived at the entrance of a valley. At the beginning of the opening cinematic, there was a powerful old voice narrating a few sentences in an ancient tone, which set the tone of the entire script. In the exploration team of about 100 people, there are powerful officials, generals with outstanding military achievements, and even relatives of the royal family. Of course, the largest number of people are still soldiers and servants. As the narrator narrated, a group of people dressed in ancient China clothing and armor came out of a mountain road one after another. The three men leading the group were riding horses, and each of them was wearing a different style of official uniform, which seemed to indicate that they came from different organizations. Judging from the eyes of these three people, their physiques, and the aura that they exuded, they were undoubtedly martial artists, and they were all experts who had been through killing for a long time. Following behind the three vanguards was a large group of soldiers wearing light armor and carrying swords at their waist. At first glance, these people looked like ordinary soldiers, but if one looked closely, it was not difficult to see that they were all martial artists with a certain level of internal energy foundation. They were definitely not ordinary soldiers. Looking further back, one could see other people on horseback, as well as carriages. There were a total of 3 carriages in the group, and they were slowly moving forward under the escort of the soldiers. Each carriage was pulled by 2 horses. Other than a coachman who drove the carriage, there was also a rider who followed closely beside the coachman. With one look, one could tell that this was the role of a personal bodyguard. Finally, at the end of the group, there were 2 riders and more than 10 people in casual clothes. Although these people were not equipped with weapons or armor, they were all strong men. Just by looking at their footsteps, one could tell that they were much lighter than the average person. Ming, 22 years of Xingping. The emperor was infected with a terrible disease. He urgently summoned 3 of his trusted aides to the palace and personally issued a secret edict. After a month, the 3 actual leaders of the governor's office, the embroidered uniform guards, and the Eastern faction guards led a mysterious group of people and appeared in this valley located in the barren land. When the narration reached this point, a caption appeared in the vision of the players and the audience at the same time. The content was as follows. Note: the history of the Ming dynasty in this scenario is very different from the actual history. The basic setting is Ming Guangzong, who should have died of illness in the same year as Zhu Chongluo, lived for another 30 years before dying of illness. The butterfly effect created from that caused a huge change in the Ming dynasty's ruler, government structure, and the duration of the dynasty. The current scenario takes place in a period that does not exist in official history. Xing Ping is a fictional era, and so is the emperor and other characters. After the subtitles appeared and paused for a while, the narration continued. This valley is called Heart Burial Valley. It is located in a desolate area at the border. The entrance of the valley is extremely difficult to find, and the valley is isolated from the rest of the world. Legend has it that a king of hell lives in Heartgrave Valley. He can control life and death. If those who have nowhere to go in the world can be taken in by the king of hell and enter the valley, they will be able to preserve their lives. No matter who they are, what they have done outside, no matter how powerful their enemies are, once they enter Heartgrave Valley, the king of hell will ensure their survival. However, this person will not be able to leave the valley for the rest of their life. Or else, they will have to return the life that the king of hell has given them to the king of hell. After this introduction, the camera turned, and the image cut to the deepest part of Heartgrave Valley, behind a mountain pass. By the bank of a clear spring, a rather large village appeared. At the end of the village there was a mountain villa. The players' eyes followed the camera as they weaved through the village. The king of the desert blade, Di Ho, the first spear, Feng Er, the flying dragon swordsman, He Ziming, the head of octagonal spire, Meng Qi. Whenever the narration announced the names of these people, the camera would quickly move to one of the villagers and stay there for a few seconds. Obviously, this was a hint, or perhaps an indication. These villagers who were plowing the fields, fetching water, and feeding the animals were all once famous figures in their respective regions. These masters who once dominated the martial arts world are now ghosts under the king of hell. Their lives don't belong to them anymore. It's because they've done something wrong. Killing the innocent, betraying the country, collaborating with the enemy, raping women, killing for money. Everyone in this village has done things that they shouldn't do as a human, so they no longer have a place in the world. That's why he came here and became a ghost. It's not that no one has tried to hunt down the fugitives in Heartgrave Valley. Many years ago, someone tried, and in recent years, there have been others who have tried, but these people either gave up or became ghosts. Until today, the order of this place will be broken. The plot introduction ended there, and the players gained the ability to move at the same time. This time, the 2 teams teleported together and stayed at the same place as their teammate. F***CK. What's going on? Wang Tongji asked as soon as he stood still. At that moment, the 4 members of Hell Frontline appeared in the middle of a desert. About 10 meters in front of them, there were more than 10 groups of people scattered around. With a rough estimation, there were about 300 to 400 people. These people were dressed differently and carried different weapons. Based on the distance between the group, they came from at least 10 different camps, and that did not include those who stood alone. Could this be a martial arts convention? That was the first thought that popped into Hua Jian's mind, because she quickly noticed the bald monks, Taoist priests, Taoist nuns, salt merchants, and so on. With Miss Anne's many years of experience watching wuxia movies, the people before her were most likely martial artists from various factions. Probably, Feng Bujua said. Speaking of which, I feel like this scene is quite familiar. Actually, at that moment, Brother Ju had already predicted that the scenario would take place in the world of sword duel in Chonglin. There were two reasons for that. First, he had heard the name Octagon Spire in the introductory cinematic. This organization was one of the one mansion, 2 floors, 3 factions, 4 doors in Chonglin sword duel. Secondly, after communicating with Phantom Demon Church, Brother Ju had found out something. The Bell Demon that he killed at the mountain behind Chonglin Town was actually one of the 9 necromancers under the King of the Abyss. She was similar to Fu Ling on Devil's Maw Island, a former 9 necromancers who had been exiled. This connection also proved that this scenario world existed in the main universe of Thriller Paradise, and all the matches in Battle of the Four Worlds took place in the main universe. This made Brother Ju even more certain of his speculation. Several seconds later, Yu realized the meaning behind Feng Bujue's words, and she turned to say, "This is the scenario world at Chonglin Town, right?" Xiao Tan heard that and asked, "So, that world is also in the main universe?" "That's normal." Feng Bujue shrugged. "Since there is a planet similar to America from the 80s in the main universe, why can't there be a planet similar to China from the 16th century? You have a point. We've been to planets filled with rabbits who know how to punch." Xiao Tan nodded. Just as they were talking, suddenly, a figure flew into the sky and flew over the crowd's heads. He walked through the air and landed on a tall rock in the desert, standing before the crowd. It was a man in his 50s. He had a valiant face and a dignified appearance. He was tall and straight and had an extraordinary bearing. He wore a green robe with a metal belt around his waist. He held a shirt in his hands and wore boots on his feet. He was not wearing any weapon. "Fellow heroes." After the man stopped, he used a condescending gaze to scan the crowd before him and said, "Greetings. I Yuan Wushuang greet you." His voice was not loud, and he did not shout, but every word that he said traveled clearly into the ears of everyone within a few hundred meters. "Telepathy through internal energy, is it?" Feng Bujue scratched his chin and said, "To be able to use it on so many people at the same time in such an open space. That goes to show how powerful he is. Other than that, since he dares to jump up to such a high spot and speak so loudly to the entire martial world, it means that his position in the martial world is not to be underestimated." The next second, the people's reaction explained the identity of Yuan Wushuang. "Greetings, Alliance Master." Similar words were heard from the crowd, both near and far. "So, it's the leader of the martial world." Feng Bujue used a tone that said, "Well, it's just the leader of the martial world. Fellow heroes, there's no need to be so polite." After a few seconds, the leader saluted back and said loudly, "The situation is urgent and time waits for no one. I'll get straight to the point." He paused for half a second and said, "I've received reliable news that half a month ago, the Imperial Court sent more than 100 masters all the way from Shuntian Prefecture to Buried Heart Valley. They arrived not long ago." As he spoke, he turned around and gestured to Shan-Ing, who was far behind him. "After a few inquiries, I found out there's a longevity technique hidden in Buried Heart Valley. It's said that those who master it can live forever and stay young forever." Before he could finish his words, a commotion broke out from the crowd. In fact, it was hard to say whether he wanted to say it or not, because it was basically an open secret. If the group of martial artists standing below did not know about the art of immortality, how could they be so enthusiastic to come to this desolate place? "Heroes." The Alliance Master paused for a moment before continuing. "The art of immortality is a classic created by the people of our martial arts world. How can we hand it over to those lackeys of the Imperial Court?" His tone suddenly became agitated. "I think this is absolutely impossible." "That's right. We can't do that. You're wise, leader. We can't let the longevity technique fall into the hands of those lackeys. Alliance Master Yuan nodded in satisfaction when he heard the cheers. I've invited all of you here today to ask for your help. I have a feeling. Hearing this, a smile suddenly appeared on Brother Ju's face. That he is going to say something very shameless. His prophecy came true at once. As expected, Alliance Master Yuan's next sentence was, "As long as we gather the strength of all the factions, it'll be easy to take down those lackeys of the imperial court." He waved his hand and waved his sleeve. "However, I'm sure the imperial court won't let this go. They'll definitely send people to steal the technique from Buried Heart Valley. Therefore, I think that the longevity technique should be safeguarded by all of us in the martial arts world." Alliance Master is right. It should be safeguarded by us. The sect leaders of several sects couldn't wait to respond to Alliance Master Yuan's call, shouting loudly. I'm speechless at this logic. Hua Jian looked at the NPC in disdain and sneered. Let's not talk about the Ming Dynasty government in this world. Even if they're a group of robbers, this Alliance Master seems to be saying that our neighbor has a treasure, and to prevent robbers from robbing it, we'll take it and safekeep it for our neighbor. Also, Ruo Yu added coldly, the so-called safekeeping by all of the martial arts world means that he, the Alliance Master, will safekeep it first, right? After the item is in his hands, it's hard to say if he'll take it out again or if what he takes out is real or fake. I think, even if he's really forced to safekeep it with someone else, Brother Ju said. Xiao Tan added, he will definitely copy down the spell or memorize it first before handing it over. Humph, you're all too naive. Hearing his teammates' words, Feng Bujua shook his head with a smile. If it's me, everyone here today, after being used by me, will not be able to walk out of this desert alive. The few of them spoke without thinking, and their voices were quite loud, but no one paid them any attention. This was because, until now, the system protection time, after entering the scenario, had not passed. Brother Ju and the rest knew this very well. After all, they were level 50 players, and they had plenty of experience in the scenario, so they were familiar with the details of the game. Based on the current situation, the four of them had appeared out of nowhere, and there were so many people standing around them, but none of the NPCs had noticed their presence. This was undoubtedly due to the system's protection. Since none of you have any objections. Seeing how things were progressing smoothly, Leader Yuan continued, then let's not waste any time. The sun is setting, and it's the best time to enter the valley. It looked like he had done a thorough investigation. Buried Heart Valley is shrouded in a light fog, so you can see things in the dark. Everyone, follow me now. We'll wipe out those government dogs and find the art of immortality and protect it. As soon as he finished speaking, the various sects were already in an uproar as they rushed forward. In the blink of an eye, the hundreds of people had already followed the person surnamed Yuan and rushed towards the valley a few kilometers away. Wherever they passed, waves of sand and dust were raised. Only Brother Ju and the other three stood where they were. They looked at the motley crowd and tossed them a condescending gaze. Main quest triggered. Killed 4 members of Red Sakura. At the same time, the quest announcement appeared. Chapter 1038. Based on what happened 5 minutes after the start of the game, the opening of the scenario was split into 2 parts. The first part was the introduction cinematic and narration. The 2 teams watched this part together, but the second part was different. The 4 from Underworld Frontline were transported to the location of the Jianghu faction, and under the protection of the system, they watched a martial arts competition. Red Cherry, on the other hand, was transported to Buried Heart Valley, and they met Yama. Yama was a title that sent chills down one's spine, because when people mentioned this title, they would associate it with death. Perhaps there were people in this world who were not afraid of death, but for most people, death was scary. Therefore, Yama was scary as well. However, The Yama in Buried Heart Valley was not scary at all. Not only was she not scary, she was mesmerizing. This was because Yama was a woman, a beautiful woman. Her beauty was enough to take one's breath away, making one's soul sway and yearn for her even in their dreams. Furthermore, after so many years, Yama's appearance and body had remained the same as that of an 18 or 19-year-old girl. Time did not seem to have left any trace on her body. Therefore, no one knew how old Yama was. Some said she was 40, some said she was 50, and some said there was more than one Yama, and this woman was Yama's daughter. Of course, the last speculation was obviously impossible. Yama would meet the ghosts in the valley at least once a month, so if she was pregnant, it would be impossible for her to hide it. Therefore, there was the saying of the art of immortality, Even though the 4 players from Red Cherry Blossom had suddenly appeared in front of him, Yama's expression didn't change much. His tone was calm as well. Something rare happened today. At this moment, Yama was lying on a wide jade bed with one hand on her forehead. She was wearing a thin gauze dress, and her exquisite body and fair skin were faintly discernible. Someone actually managed to sneak into my Buried Heart Valley and into my villa without making a sound. At this point, Yama sat up cross-legged and glanced at the 4 players. And 4 ladies. This is... The Blood Rose cupped her hands and thought for a few seconds before she decided what to call him. Senior, we have mistakenly entered this place today, and we have offended you. May I know your name? Blood Rose was Red Cherry's vice-captain. She was also the team's brains. Most of the negotiations with the NPCs were handled by her. Since she was in charge of this work, she definitely understood the basic principles. For example, at any time, especially when one had just entered the scenario, one could be more courteous to those NPCs who did not attack directly or who were not hostile. That way, one might be able to receive a mission, information, or even profit directly. Hee. Yama laughed and stood up. You broke into someone else's house and asked them to introduce themselves? Hearing this, Su Huaishang was the first to react. She quickly took half a step forward and bowed. I apologize for my lack of manners. Please forgive me, I am Su. Wait a minute. To her surprise, Yama suddenly interrupted Su Huaishang and slowly walked toward her. In an instant, the atmosphere became tense. Even though the woman did not say it explicitly, all the members of Red Cherry knew that, based on the 2 sentences of My Buried Heart Valley and My Villa, this beautiful woman before them was most likely the Yama mentioned in the introduction. Furthermore, when faced with the sudden appearance of 4 armed strangers, she was able to maintain such a calm demeanor. This conclusion was not far from the truth. Dong, dong. Yama walked barefooted across the wooden floor, creating a light sound of footstep. Her feet were beautiful as well. The delicate curves and smooth skin would make one forget that they were supposed to be the roughest part of the human body. Yama walked to stand before Su Huaishang and stood there quietly. 2 seconds later, she slowly raised her right hand and used her thumb and index finger to hold Su Huaishang's chin, raising her face slightly. At that moment, the 2 beautiful faces were inches away from each other. Their eyes met. Time seemed to have stopped. Even time seemed to want to stop at this moment. The tense atmosphere suddenly changed, and it actually became a little ambiguous. 90% of the audience, regardless of gender, swallowed their saliva when they saw this scene. They did not know why. Continue. Yama looked at Su Huaishang with a seductive gaze. What is your name? I am Su Huaishang. Su Huaishang replied calmly, but in her heart, she was already complaining. What's going on? Another Ji Xiaolong, harem city lord? Yama heard this and smiled, then turned around and walked back to where he was standing. As he walked, he said, All right? I won't pursue the matter of you breaking in. Hey, how can this be? What a superficial world. Long live Shang Shang. Oh, Yama's lily soul has awakened. I've decided, I'm going to take a screenshot of that scene and use it as my desktop. Not only did the audience accept this setting, even the members of Red Cherry Blossom, well done, Captain. Bloody Rose turned around and whispered to Su Huaishang. No wonder you're the captain. Even the NPC is unable to resist your charm. Hyacinth added. Tai Haiting added, looks like the scenario's boss is on our side now. Phew. Su Huaishang sighed and shook her head. I don't know if I should be happy about something like this. On the other hand, at Underworld Frontline, after some preparation in the desert, they quickly caught up to the group of martial arts heroes and followed them into the valley. Even though Brother Ju and the rest did not want to move with these people, there was no reason for them not to take advantage of the free cannon fodder. Ha! As expected. In less than 2 minutes after entering the valley, Feng Bujua stopped and turned to tell his teammates, "We've been poisoned." The reason he said, as expected, was because Brother Ju had already predicted the defense mechanism of this place. His conclusion was, poison gas was a good solution. With his reminder, Ruoyu, Xiao Tan, and Hua Jian opened the game menu to check and saw the word poisoned in their status bar. Is it caused by the fog? Ruoyu's first reaction was quick and accurate. I believe so, Brother Ju replied. Since it's caused by the fog, Hua Jian said, then it's pointless for me to use my skill to cure you guys because you'll be poisoned again. That's right. We have to understand the mechanism behind this poisoning. Xiao Tan scratched his chin and said, based on my prediction, this kind of glowing fog is probably formed from the chemical reaction between certain plants in the valley and the surrounding environment. Based on the law of nature, the natural antidote that can neutralize this kind of poison will be found in the valley. Yes, it's over there. Feng Bujua lazily pointed at a bush not far away from them. Huh! Xiao Tan was stunned. To be honest, it was rare for Xiao Tan to show off. If it were not for the fact that he was a medical student and had some knowledge in this field, he would not have expressed his opinion. But, as soon as he finished explaining his theory, Brother Ju, a layman, actually gave him an answer. It was a little unbelievable. Your theory is undoubtedly correct, but, by bypassing professional knowledge and starting from a purely logical point of view, this can also be deduced. Feng Bujua knew Xiao Tan very well and knew what he was thinking just by looking at his expression. So, he immediately explained, from the opening cinematic, we can see that there are people living in the valley. They breathe the air in the valley every day, so they must take the antidote all year round. And the antidote, whether it's water, plants, or animals in short, it must come from the valley. He spread his hands and smiled. In this day and age, it's impossible to airdrop supplies. Buried Heart Valley is surrounded by desert. If the antidote has to be obtained outside the valley, how troublesome would that be? Yeah. Besides, Yama doesn't allow the people in the valley to leave, right? Xiao Tan replied. Hua Jian nodded thoughtfully and said, even if Yama allows it, there are too many variables to go outside the valley to obtain the antidote. What if the people who go to get the antidote don't come back for some reason? Won't the people in the valley be waiting for death? So, the antidote, or the raw materials needed to make the antidote, can only be found in Buried Heart Valley. As Feng Bujua said this, he gestured to his teammates, indicating for them to follow him. The 4 of them soon arrived at the bush that Brother Ju had pointed out earlier. They found some roots that had been picked behind a few trees. Even though there are some trees between us, I noticed that there are traces of a large area of soil being turned over. Feng Bujua said, at first, I didn't understand what was going on. But after looking at the status bar, I realized this is obviously done by the people from the Imperial Court. Their purpose is to get rid of the fog poison. Since they have a lot of people, they dug up a lot of soil. When Xiao Tan heard this, he suddenly thought of something. That's strange. The people from the Imperial Court, they just arrived here, and they already found out that they were poisoned? This was indeed a question worth pondering. Up until now, none of the martial artists who walked in front of the players had noticed that they were poisoned. This meant that the fog poison in the valley did not have any obvious physical effects, at least when they were first poisoned. The players in the game could directly see their abnormal status through the status bar. But how did the people from the imperial court notice it? Everyone, please wait. Just as Xiao Tan raised his question, Alliance Master Yuan's voice rang out from about 300 feet ahead of them. There's poison in the fog. A few seconds later, Alliance Master Yuan told them a rather nasty truth, and it caused a commotion among the crowd. Everyone, don't panic. Use your inner energy to protect your heart meridian, and you can slow down the poison. After all, Alliance Master Yuan was the leader of Wulin, and he was very experienced. He quickly came up with a theory that was similar to Xiao Tan and Brother Ju's. Then, he had the people who were well versed in medicine go around the area to see if there was anything that could neutralize the poison. By then, the 4 from Underworld Frontline had already neutralized the poison, and each of them had left some antidotes in their backpack. I think I get it now. Feng Bujua thought about it for a few minutes before saying, those with higher mastery of internal energy should be able to notice that they have been poisoned faster and more sensitive than normal people. He paused. Therefore, that alliance leader Yuan was the first to discover this. His eyes shifted slightly and he said, From this we can gain some additional information. Yu's train of thought followed Brother Ju's. When she heard this, she said, among the people from the imperial court, there is at least one person whose inner energy cultivation is not lower than that of the leader of Wulin, and another person who is well versed in medicine and can identify the antidote quickly. That's right, Brother Ju said. Of course, the 2 people you mentioned could be the same person. They chatted leisurely, but they did not tell the NPCs where the antidote was. Fortunately, there were some people who were well versed in Chinese herbs and medicine among the Wulin heroes. They spent more than 10 minutes to find the root that could neutralize the fog poison. About 30 minutes later, the hundreds of people finally swallowed the antidote, adjusted their breathing, and were ready to continue their journey. However, at this moment there was another change. Swish, 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 swish. The sound of wind breaking came from the air. At first glance, this sound was very ordinary. Everyone present had heard the sound of this kind of hidden weapon before. However, when the thing that caused the sound of wind approached, they felt a strong and gloomy murderous intent. The sound of many weapons being unsheathed followed the sound of wind breaking, rising and falling one after another. However, there was no sound of metal clashing. This meant that not a single one of those hidden weapons had been blocked. Therefore, after a few seconds, some people were dead and some were still alive. The dead people fell to the ground and the living people screamed in shock. The person who threw the hidden weapons used his inner energy to transmit his words into the people's ears. If we move forward, more people will die. At the same time, Alliance Master Yuan walked quickly to the nearest corpse and looked at the hidden weapon in the wound. At that moment, his expression changed. This is Moon attracting flying star dart, he murmured. Then, he channeled his inner energy and said loudly, I was wondering who it was. So it's Star Moon Godly Dart Song Wuchi. There was a hint of disdain in his tone. 15 years ago, Your Excellency colluded with bandits and killed your own sworn brother. You raped your own daughter and slaughtered your entire family. These bestial acts have not been forgotten by the martial artists. Alliance Master Yuan said righteously, Now, you still dare to be a dog blocking the way in front of the heroes. You really don't know what's good for you. As soon as he finished speaking, he raised one of his palms. Alliance Master Yuan used his inner energy to sound out and confirm Song Wuchi's hiding place. Therefore, after he finished speaking, he channeled 70% of his inner energy and slammed his palm toward Song Wuchi. Chapter 1039. It was a cold winter night. The sky was dark purple and the ground was silver white. Yuan Chi came out of a tavern and walked into a secluded alley, still a little drunk. It was his 30th birthday. At 30 years old, Yuan Chi was still a third-rate figure in the martial arts world. In terms of appearance, he could be considered ordinary and could not be considered handsome. In terms of intelligence, he could be considered reasonable, but he couldn't be considered smart. As for martial arts, he was indeed better than the average person. Unfortunately, his master was just a third-rate person like him, and could only teach him some superficial martial arts. All in all, he was a man with mediocre looks, mediocre intelligence, and mediocre martial arts. In the martial arts world, people like him would never be able to make a name for themselves. If someone had said to him, "You can be the leader of the martial arts world in the future," he would have thought it was a joke or even a mockery. However, someone really did say it. It was a blind fortune-teller with a hunched back and a face full of ulcers. On this cold winter night, the blind man sat at a broken table by the roadside with a long banner propped up, waiting for customers. Yuan Chi, who was passing by, saw the blind man and walked over to sit at the table. "Sir, it's late," Yuan Chi said. "So what?" The blind man's voice was very strange. It was very hoarse, as if someone was strangling him. "There's no one on the street," Yuan Chi said. "I know," the blind man replied. "I can hear it." Yuan Chi smiled and shook his head. "Sir, I have some loose silver here. You can take it and go back. I'm not a beggar." The blind man knew what Yuan Chi was trying to say and interrupted him. Yuan Chi pursed his lips, thinking that the blind man didn't know what was good for him. However, on second thought, he felt that the blind man had some strength of character. Then, "Sir, please read my fortune," Yuan Chi said after some thought. "Sure, what do you want to ask?" the blind man asked. "Ha!" Yuan Chi chuckled. Originally, he didn't want to do any fortune-telling, but he saw that the blind man was pitiful. He was still standing on the street in the cold, so he wanted to give him a few taels of silver to let him go back. But since he didn't want to, Yuan Chi casually replied, "Then I'll ask about your future." Yuan Chi knew a thing or two about fortune-telling. It was a skill that required careful observation of one's words and body language. It was not easy to make a living out of empty promises. Flattering, coaxing, provoking, scaring. Different people needed different ways of dealing with them. If one wanted to make a living in this field, one had to prepare at least dozens of speeches. Not only did one have to know them by heart, one had to know how to improvise. If one spoke well, it wouldn't be difficult to earn some money to make a living. However, if one said something wrong, not getting paid was considered light. Being beaten and scolded by others was also a common occurrence. Yuan Chi had been in Jianghu for many years and had interacted with people from all walks of life. He knew a thing or two about all kinds of things. At this moment, he did not want to make things difficult for the blind man, so he asked a beginner question. In his heart, he thought, it would be enough to listen to him brag a little. Unexpectedly, "All right," the blind man said and stretched out his hands. "Dear customer, let me touch your face." Yuan Chi looked at the man's rough and skinny hands and shook his head with a bitter smile. "All right." He was a big and burly man, so he wasn't afraid that this blind man would take advantage of him. If he wanted to touch him, then so be it. So, Yuan Chi guided the blind man's hands and placed them on his temples. To Yuan Chi's surprise, the blind man's hands were very warm and not as cold as he had imagined. His hands were also very strong and gave off a sense of sturdiness that did not match his appearance. Soon, the blind man had touched Yuan Chi's forehead, cheeks, chin, even the top of his head and behind his ears. Then, he retracted his hand. "Heh!" Yuan Chi saw that the blind man had lowered his head and did not speak. He guessed that the blind man was going to deliberately mystify him. He laughed and asked, "How is it, mister?" Since you're asking about your future, I'll give you one. The blind man replied in a low voice, "From today onwards, you will practice martial arts as usual and walk the martial arts world. Within 10 years, there will be no more than 3 people who can stand shoulder to shoulder with you in the martial arts world. By then, if you haven't deviated from the right path, the position of the chief of the martial arts world will be yours." When Yuan Qi heard this, he was stunned for a while before he reacted. Then, he laughed out loud. Ha! Ha 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 ha! He laughed so hard that he could barely open his eyes. "Mr. Hehel, according to what you said, as long as I practice martial arts diligently and don't do evil, I'll be successful in 10 years' time, at most?" The blind man did not answer his question. Instead, he asked him a question: "Is today your birthday?" Yuan Qi was stunned when he heard this. Then, a suspicious look appeared on his face as he replied, "Yes." He did not know how the blind man guessed that today was his birthday. He only knew that it was not a stupid question like, "Have you been troubled in your life recently?" It was a fact that the probability of him getting it right was less than 1 in 300. "Good." After receiving a reply, the blind man said loudly, "Good." Then, he said, "It seems that this is the will of the heavens." He muttered a few strange words, then, he suddenly grabbed Yuan Qi's left arm that was resting on the table. At this moment Yuan Qi was mostly sober. He took a deep breath of cold air to clear his mind. "Mister, what do you mean? You've been practicing martial arts since you were 12. You've only been apprenticed to one master. You've learned 4.5 sets of martial arts from him, and 4 of them are the worst of the worst." The blind man suddenly started talking to himself. Yuan Qi's heart skipped a beat when he heard this. This was because what the blind man said was exactly the truth. When Yuan Qi was young, he came from a wealthy family. He went to private school for a few years, but he was not cut out for studying. Even after a few years, he did not make much progress. So, when he was 12, his father invited a very famous martial arts master in the county. Yuan Qi became his disciple, and from then on, he gave up his studies and started practicing martial arts. Of course, this martial arts master's fame was limited to the county where Yuan Qi's family lived. In the martial arts world, he was a third-rate figure. Fortunately, although this old master's martial arts skills were limited, his ethics were impeccable. He taught Yuan Qi everything he knew and strictly supervised him. Before he died, he even passed on half of his master's secret manual to Yuan Qi. Who are you?" Yuan Qi asked in shock. "How do you know?" The blind man ignored Yuan Qi's question. He grabbed Yuan Qi's arm and continued, "The half set of martial arts you didn't learn is called Faded Star Mysterious Technique. It's a peerless technique that has been lost for a long time." While the blind man was talking, Yuan Qi felt a warm current flowing into his arm and moving in a specific pattern in his meridians. This type of martial arts is very strange. No matter how much you practice, you won't feel any improvement in your skills. The blind man explained calmly as he channeled the energy into Yuan Qi. Every year, the Faded Star Mysterious Technique can only be improved once, and the time to do so must be on the day of the practitioner's birthday. Once that day is missed, then the cultivator's previous year's worth of painstaking cultivation will all go up in smoke. Hearing this, Yuan Qi's mind buzzed and he almost fainted. Obviously, Yuan Qi had practiced the Faded Star Mysterious Technique before, and he had studied it very hard. Even if he didn't know that this was a peerless martial art, and didn't even know what the martial art he was practicing was called, he could still see that the mental cultivation method in the half of the secret manual was much more profound than the martial arts taught by his master. Anyone who mingled in the martial arts world was ambitious. Yuan Qi also knew that for someone like him who was still mediocre at the age of 30, that half of the secret manual was probably his last hope to make a name for himself. However, in the past few years, No matter how hard he tried to practice that half of the mental cultivation method, he couldn't use it to improve his skills. He felt that it was more practical to practice those shallow martial arts. At least he could feel that his skills were gradually improving. Until today, when he heard the blind man's words, Yuan Qi finally knew the secret hidden in that half of the secret manual. Senior. Yuan Qi had changed the way he addressed the blind man because he knew that the man in front of him was not a fortune teller, but an expert that he had never met before. Stop talking. The blind man interrupted him again. Remember the direction of my cultivation method. This is not in your half of the secret manual. Yuan Qi heard this and immediately closed his eyes, concentrating on memorizing it. He was a man with bad luck, so he knew that he had to seize the opportunity. Yuan Qi knew that he wasn't the kind of martial arts genius who could master it in one try, and this fortuitous encounter. He probably wouldn't have a second chance, so he had to try his best to remember the other party's cultivation method. The north wind whistled and the night grew darker. After an unknown period of time, the blind man withdrew his inner energy and let go of Yuan Qi's hand. All right, I've used my inner energy to help you break through the destiny mysterious technique. This year's end, the mysterious technique that you've accumulated in the past year has been activated. I'm sure you can feel it. The blind man's breathing was still very steady when he spoke, which showed that his inner energy was unfathomable. From today onwards, you'll still cultivate according to the mental cultivation method in your half of the secret manual. On your birthday, use the method I taught you today to circulate your inner energy. Only then can you unleash the true power of the destiny mysterious technique. Before he could finish speaking, Yuan Qi had already knelt on the ground and kowtowed 3 times while trembling. Thank you, Senior. Yuan Qi almost choked with sobs as he said these 4 words. Naturally, this was not some kind of performance. It was an action that came from the bottom of his heart. Yuan Qi's forehead was already bleeding on the cold snow, his eyes were also filled with tears. These tears carried too many emotions of a mediocre person. Bitterness, helplessness, despair, lamentation, joy, longing, excitement, and sorrow. That moment of realization was something that Yuan Qi would never forget. No need to thank me. As I said, this is the will of the heavens. As the blind man spoke, he stood up and fumbled for the wooden banner beside him. For you to be able to meet me at this time and place, and for me to tell your fortune, this is something that only the heavens can predict. He paused and continued, actually, before you even sat down, I've already found out about 70 to 80% of your martial arts and inner energy. When I raised my hand to feel your bones, I wanted to tell your fortune, but I didn't expect to find half of the destiny mysterious technique. When the blind man said this, he slowly turned around and continued, in today's Wuling world, the people who can create their own martial arts are almost extinct. And the divine skills left behind by the ancestors are gradually being lost in the hands of idiots who know how to teach but don't know how to learn but don't know how to teach. He shook his head and coldly snorted, "Humph. I met you by chance. If my little effort today can make the destiny mysterious technique reappear in the world, it can be considered as adding some interest to the martial arts world, which is getting worse and worse with each generation." At that time, Yuan Qi couldn't understand the meaning of the blind man's words at all, but 20 years later, Alliance Master Yuan seemed to understand. For those ordinary people who struggled in Jianghu, obtaining was the most important thing. Peerless martial arts, great wealth, great fame, these were all things that they wanted to obtain. But for an otherworldly expert like the blind man, obtaining wasn't that important. When one's martial arts reached a level where it was difficult to obtain defeat, what one obtained was loneliness. When one's wealth reached an uncountable amount, what one obtained was numbness. When one's fame reached a level where the world knew about it, what one obtained was emptiness. A person who was strong to the point of loneliness, numbness, and emptiness would either walk towards destruction or transcendence. Blind was clearly a transcendent person. Transcendent people would cross oceans for a moment of glory and would stop moving forward for a speck of dust. However, they would not toil for fame and fortune, nor would they feel great sorrow or joy for the gains and losses in front of them. Unfortunately, although Yuan Qi understood many things now, he was no longer the Yuan Qi of the past. He knew what a transcendental person was like, so he also knew that he could never become that kind of person. 20 years later, in buried Heart Valley, boom, a gust of wind blew, and the palm's shadow was like a mountain. Who in the martial arts world could block Yuan Qi's 70% power? The answer was, no one could. Unlike those famous people who became famous at a young age and had a smooth life, the first half of Yuan Qi's life was miserable. He deeply understood the pain of being a mediocre person, and the fear of this pain was his endless motivation. Driven by this motivation, Yuan Qi's cultivation of mysterious art far exceeded the blind man's estimation. After 20 years of accumulation and 20 breakthroughs, Yuan Qi's fated star mysterious art had long reached the realm of perfection. Since he ascended to the throne of the Wulin Alliance with the title of #1 martial artist in the world 10 years ago, he had never used his full strength again. Because since then, in the entire martial arts world, there was no one who could be on par with him. In the blink of an eye, the power of Yuan Qi's palm easily broke a big tree, and conveniently split Song Wuqi, who was hiding behind the tree trunk, into two. The blood and organs that spurted out were particularly eye-catching in the green forest. Under the light of the fog, it was as if they were glowing. None of the martial artists who had witnessed this palm strike were not amazed by Yuan Qi's strength. To them, that palm strike was simply a realm that they would never be able to reach in their lifetime. However, there were also people who showed disdain and ridiculed. "Tisk, it's not that strong. I'll develop the performance of Rankyaku again, and I should be able to kick out a move with similar power." "I'm curious." Hua Jian ignored Brother Ju and said, "In a wuxia scenario, will a humanoid NPC of this level be killed by a normal bullet?" "Yes, we've tried. Actually, bullets have a miraculous effect in this kind of scenario. Most of the NPCs that are not that strong can be killed by a normal gun, and they are practically defenseless against this kind of attack. Even though this is not the case for boss-level NPCs, they can still be killed from a long distance with a more powerful shooting skill." "That's right," Ruoyu said. Hua Jian sighed. "I suddenly feel like there's a problem with the arrangement of the players for this match." TSK. Brother Ju knew what Missen meant, so he shook his head and said, "So what if Xiao Ling can counter the NPCs in the scenario? We're having a competition, okay? The lineup I arranged is to deal with Red Cherry, not the scenario. Furthermore, the scenario is random, so how would I know it will be a wuxiao world? Why would someone who is so obsessed with completing the scenario use such an excuse?" Ruoyu said coldly. "Then I'll have to see how you're so focused on the competition." Chapter 1040. When a person stayed in Jianghu for a long time, he would learn how to communicate with the dead. The dead could not speak, but they could still tell the living many things. Moreover, the dead were often more honest than the living. At this moment, Song Wuqi was already a dead man, and the people standing around his corpse were all living people. These living people came to check the corpse after asking for Alliance Master Yuan's permission. Without a doubt, they were all experts in this field. In just a few minutes, these people learned many things from the corpse that was cut into two. If I remember correctly, 15 years ago, Song Wuqi was already 37 years old. Yes, he was already 37 years old. He practiced hidden weapons. He only practiced hidden weapons. Hidden weapons are easy to learn, but difficult to master. It's hard to reach the ultimate level in hidden weapons. After the age of 40, People who practice concealed weapon martial arts usually won't make any progress in their external skills and realms. However, the 52-year-old Song Wuqi's external skills are better than before. It's the same for his internal skills. After those people finished checking the corpse, they began to talk in front of Alliance Master Yuan. Their conclusion was obvious. In the past 15 years, Song Wuqi must have received guidance from an expert. That was why he could improve his martial arts to a new level at an age when his physical strength and energy had already passed the peak. Of course, even if Song Wuqi had become a first-class master from a quasi-first-class master, he could not escape the fate of being killed by Yuan Qi. Heroes. Not long after, Alliance Master Yuan organized his words. Then, he channeled his inner strength and spoke loudly to the Jianghu fellows. Everyone has seen it. His tone was obviously provocative. Let's not talk about how many Jianghu scum and beasts the King of Hell has sheltered over the years. Let's talk about this Song Wuqi in front of us. After entering the valley for 15 years, his martial arts have improved greatly. At this point, the crowd began to talk among themselves. It seems that Buried Heart Valley is a place where evil people live and cultivate evil. Yuan Qi had been the Wulin Alliance master for 10 years. According to his experience, there were some things that had to be said clearly. This was because there were indeed many people who were so stupid that they wouldn't understand if you didn't point it out. I think the other scum who escaped into the valley must be the same as Song Wuqi. They must have received guidance from the King of Hell, and have greatly improved their skills. Heroes, you must not be careless. At this point, everyone naturally understood what he meant. Thank you for your reminder, Alliance Master. Alliance Master's foresight is truly admirable. There were also many people who took advantage of the opportunity to flatter him. As for the underworld frontline, let's go. Feng Bujue suddenly suggested. Aren't we going to follow them? Hua Jian asked. There are so many free cannon fodder. These people are completely unreliable. Brother Ju shook his head and replied lazily, some of them gathered here for the art of immortality, which is profit. Some of them are here to stand out in this operation, which is fame. He paused for a moment. Whether it's fame or profit, it's ultimately about chasing after one's own desires and not belief. When people are in a life-and-death situation, their beliefs may not be reliable, let alone their desires. To put it simply, if the situation starts to worsen, staying with these people will become a hidden worry. His teammates listened to him and pondered for a moment. A few seconds later, Ruo Yu was the first to speak. That makes sense. The alliance formed by these gangs is very fragile. Every faction and every person has their own selfish motives. Now that they feel that the situation is favorable, they're following behind Alliance Master Yuan to show off their strength, hoping to get a share of the profits. Once the situation changes, these people will show their true colors. She paused for half a second. She looked at Xiao Tan and Houghton and said, for example, the sects that are on good terms with each other might work together to harm the sects that are on bad terms with them, or they might target the smaller sects and force them to be cannon fodder. Xiao Tan heard this and his expression changed slightly. Smaller factions. Then it must be Broken Sword Chahitsu. What's Broken Sword Chahitsu? Hua Jian asked curiously. We're Broken Sword Chahitsu, Feng Bujue replied with a smile. Huh! Hua Jian was startled, but she was soon reminded of what Ruo Yu said earlier, about coming to this world in the past. She said, oh, is that the identity that you used to come to this world? That's right, I am the leader, and you're all my disciples, Feng Bujue said and raised his hand to signal to Ruo Yu. This is the wife of the leader. The wife of the leader is no longer necessary, right? Ruo Yu asked. Indeed, at Chonglin Town, Ruo Yu had agreed to it because she wanted to cooperate with Feng Bujue to create an excuse to kill him. Don't mind the details. Feng Bujue opened his arms and replied with an expression that was enough to raise Ruoyu's strength by 10%. That's enough. Didn't you want us to leave the group? Then, lead the way. Ruoyu did not want to continue this topic with him, so she changed the topic. I believe you've already decided where to go before you came up with this suggestion, right? Humph. Of course. Feng Bujue titled his head and glanced at the forest on the left side of the group. Song Wuqi should have come from this direction. His teammates all looked in that direction, but they only saw a jumble of trees and no obvious path. However, several seconds later, Xiao Tan widened his eyes and said, "Oh, there are indeed traces left behind." Stop yelling. Feng Bujue quickly stepped forward to clamp his hand over Xiao Tan's mouth. Are you afraid that no one will notice us? To be honest, no one really paid them any attention. The big shots of Jianghu in front of him were either famous masters who traveled alone in Jianghu, or sect leader-level masters who were in charge of prestigious sects and clans. The followers they brought with them were also the disciples or trusted aides who had the highest seniority and martial arts skills in their respective sections. It could be said that the people gathered here today were all outstanding figures of their generation. How would such a group of people have the time to pay attention to a few unknown juniors like you? Only ghosts would know where you came from. People would fight to show their faces in front of the leader to claim credit. You bastards should just stay where you are. As a result, after a short detour and observation, Feng Bujue and the others secretly left the group of hundreds of people. They also left the main road that ran through the valley and turned into the forest. Like most experts who were good at using hidden weapons, Song Wuqi's qigong was not bad. It was very difficult to track the traces he left behind in the complicated terrain of the forest. Although Yuan Qi could use his internal energy to detect the real-time position of the other party, he could not find the route that the other party had taken previously. However, this was a piece of cake for Feng Bujue and Wang Tongji. One of them had a data perspective, while the other had eagle vision. For them, the more complicated the terrain was, the easier it was to track the other party. To make a long story short, after more than 20 minutes of trekking, the 4 people from Hell Frontline finally walked out of the dense forest and came to a relatively wide valley. At this time, the sun had completely set. Without the sunlight, the fog showed a soft and cold color that was similar to the moonlight. The misty light was bleak and beautiful. The players' hearts seemed to have calmed down along with the change of color around them. TSK has it disappeared, finally, beside a small river. The traces left by Song Wuqi disappeared. Brother Ju immediately snorted unhappily. I don't think it matters, Hua Jian said. There are people living in this valley all year round, and those people's lives can't be separated from the water source. As long as we walk upstream along the river, there should be a high chance that we can reach the villa in the opening cinematic. You're right. Ruoyu also agreed with her deduction. Perhaps the disappearance of Song Wuqi's tracks here is a hint that he came along the river. That makes sense. Xiao Tan also added, maybe he has the kind of martial arts that allows him to cross the river on a reed and float all the way here. Feng Bujue heard this and immediately looked at Xiao Tan with narrowed eyes. This is why you can't be a detective. Xiao Tan replied, why? Because for those who have the slightest bit of analytical talent, before coming up with the idea of crossing the river on a reed, they would first consider whether the other party came on a raft or a small boat. Feng Bujue's answer hit the nail on the head. That's not right. Xiao Tan asked again. If Song Wuqi came on a boat, then where is the boat? Someone rowed it away, Feng Bujue replied. Who said that Song Wuqi had to row the boat alone? It's normal for there to be other people on the boat, right? Xiao Tan smiled awkwardly. You're right. After ridiculing his teammates, Brother Ju led the team up the river. In this late autumn night, moving forward in the damp fog, the players' hair, face, and clothes were gradually covered with a layer of frost. The moisture quickly turned into traces of coldness, making them more spirited. As the terrain by the river was relatively flat, the four of them moved much faster than in the forest. They walked a few kilometers in less than half an hour. Then, a clear spring appeared in front of them. It was a small pool surrounded by all kinds of strange mountain rocks. The river passed through the two ends of the stone pool. The terrain upstream was abruptly higher, and downstream was gradually flatter. At this moment, on the edge of the stone pool, there was a figure standing alone. It was a thin figure, wearing a long white robe. His left hand was behind his back, clenched into a fist, and his right hand held a wine pot. He silently looked at the stone pool in front of him, and occasionally picked up the wine pot to take a sip. In the middle of the stone pool, there was only water, and there was no moon in the water. No one knew what he was looking at, and no one thought there was anything interesting there. However, he had been standing there for a long time with great interest, and he had no intention of leaving. When they were 100 meters away, the person noticed the presence of the players. When Fong Bujue and the others were less than 10 meters away, he slowly turned his head and said, "This is really meeting people everywhere." Before the person spoke, Brother Ju had already recognized him. Therefore, Brother Ju calmly saluted with his fists and said, "Greetings, Eunuch Chow." That's right, the person drinking by the stone pool was Chao Qin. "It's been more than 10 years since we parted at the Forbidden City." Chao Qin said, "Master Feng is indeed an extraordinary person. You can conceal your identity in the world and disappear without a trace for decades, and every time you appear, you still look so youthful." As he spoke, he turned around. However, the next second, Chao Qin's expression changed, and he exclaimed softly, "Ha." Feng Bujue chuckled. He knew that Chao Qin was confused because he saw that his teammate didn't age, so he explained, "Eunuch Chao is right. The martial arts of broken sword Chahitsu do have the effect of prolonging one's life, so my disciple and I, however, before he could finish, Chao Qin cut him off. Isn't your wife dead?" Feng Bujue was suddenly reminded of the time when he had a duel with Su Huaishang at the Forbidden City. For the sake of the occasion, he did say something like, "Bury me with my wife." "Well, actually, she is not dead." Chao Qin asked. "Then, that Su Huaishang from back then was obsessed with you even though she knew that your wife was not dead?" When that was said, the whole world fell silent. About 5 seconds later, all the livestream platforms exploded like a pot of boiling oil, ushering in the scariest round of bullet comments in the history of gaming livestreams. "Oh!" Ruo Yu glanced over expressionlessly and gave her brother Ju a murderous look. "Is that true?" "Yes." Hua Jian looked at him with a gloating look. "Is that true?" Xiao Tan asked curiously, "Is that true?" "No. That. Actually," Feng Bujue mumbled to Chao Qin, "she doesn't know that she is still alive." "Then why did you hide it from her?" Chao Qin asked. "If you told Su Hui that your wife is still alive, perhaps she would stop bothering you." At this point, he seemed to have thought of something. "Wait a minute. Could it be that you are playing hard to get? Are you purposely not telling her that your wife is still alive?" He paused. "Or Su Hui has already expressed to you that she is willing to be a concubine? That's why you did the opposite?" F***ck. Feng Bujue was shocked. He cursed in his mind, "You stupid eunuch, will you grow an organ if you talk less? You are already so old, yet you are still so gossipy and melodramatic, and your memory is so good. Are you trying to kill me?" At this time, Ruoyu said thoughtfully, "I think I suddenly understand why you called her fourth aunt in the harem city." Actually, she had already guessed that this was just a misunderstanding by the NPC, but it was a rare opportunity to tease Feng Bujue in public. Ruoyu did not want to miss it. "That eunuch Chow." Feng Bujue held it in for a long time before he finally said, "Can we talk about something else?" Like the weather or something. Weather? Chao Qin was stunned when he heard this. He looked up at the glowing fog above his head, then he chuckled and took a sip of wine. Then, he said in a sarcastic tone, I am also drunk. Chapter 1041. Death Penalty. Absolute Death Penalty. Death Penalty plus 65,535. Who the hell is Auntie for? How dare he spread the rumor that Shang is obsessed with you in the scenario? Burn this B** starred to death. Feng Bujue has to die. Su Hui Shang's official fan club has declared that Feng Bujue's head is ours. Shang's personal guards are ready. Execute Feng Bujue without mercy. Since the semifinals were broadcasted at different times, all the viewers who were following tournament for the best S2 were watching the same match. And their feelings when they saw this scene were basically reflected in the bullet screen and comments above. Of course, most of them were just complaining. Everyone understood that Eunuch Chao's conclusion must have been made after he was tricked in one of the scenarios. No one would treat a misunderstanding in the game world seriously. But even so, Feng Bujue's actions were unforgivable. Goddess Su's fans all agreed that it would be better for him to die. After the discussion outside the game, the focus returned to the scenario. After an awkward silence, Chao Xian spoke again. By the way, Master Feng, I do have something that I wish to ask you. He looked at Brother Ju and used a non-committal tone to ask. Back then, at the peak of the Forbidden City, you and that Miss Su dissolved into white light one after another. What kind of spell did you use? That. Feng Bujue was experienced in answering questions like this. Eunuch Chao has been practicing martial arts for a long time. Can't you tell? He sounded like he had said something, but in other words, he had thrown the question back at Chao Xian. Chao Xian smiled when he heard that. Haha. Master Feng is still the same. Fine, if you don't want to tell me, I won't force you. Compared to the last time he met his brother Ju, Chao Xian's personality had changed. 10 years ago there was still some hostility about him. From his attitude toward the three martial artists, one could see that, even though he was not bloodthirsty, he was not tired of killing. He could be merciful, but he could not be called merciful. He had lost interest in fame, but he was still obsessed with respect. However, more than 10 years had passed now. Chao Xian's face and body had recovered to the age of 40. In fact, he looked even younger than when he was at Chong Lin Town. His every word and action always revealed a hint of indifference, a hint of carefreeness, and a hint of cynicism that didn't match his age. The matters of Jianghu, the matters of martial arts, and the matters between people. He listened and asked, but he no longer cared and was not obsessed with them. With Chao Xian's current realm, he was more concerned with, how should he view the world? As for how the world viewed him, he could just laugh it off. That's very good. Feng Bujue replied and took the opportunity to ask, speaking of which. I also have something I don't understand and would like to ask for your advice. He glanced at the stone pool. As the saying goes, it's hard to drink without wine. Why is Eunuch Chao drinking wine and gazing at the spring alone in the middle of the night? Brother Ju did not ask why Chao Xian would appear at Buried Heart Valley because that was something that he could easily deduce. He had probably entered the valley together with the group of soldiers from the imperial court at the beginning of the movie. The thing that Brother Ju could not figure out was the question before him. Oh, about that. Chao Xian chuckled. 2 hours ago, I stopped here and suddenly came across a new set of martial art. I am currently working on it. Huh. Xiao Tan heard that and asked with curiosity, you will be able to perfect your martial arts while standing and drinking wine? Ha ha ha. Hearing that, Chao Xian guffawed. Little brother, then, what do you think I should do? Have you set up a posture by the side of the stone pool to practice your martial arts? Xiao Tan wanted to answer with a yes, but he felt like the man did not sound like he was asking a question. Haha! I have embarrassed myself in front of eunuch Chao. Feng Bujue quickly interrupted. This disciple of mine has the worst aptitude among all the guests. Back then, I saw that he had delicate features and thought that he was a smart kid. I did not expect him to be a fool when I accepted him as my disciple. Look, he has been with me for decades, but his martial arts level is still very low. Oh. Chao Xian nodded. Master Feng, it is not easy for you. The two of them talked back and forth like two adults talking about a kid. It was very irritating. Fortunately, Xiao Tan had a good temper, or rather, he was born with a good temperament. He did not take it to heart. Speaking of which, after chatting for a while, Feng Bujue felt that the time was right, so he changed the topic to the plot. If I am not wrong, this time eunuch Chao came to Buried Heart Valley to obtain the art of immortality for the emperor? Humph. Master Feng, you are very well informed. Chao Xian's response was equivalent to agreeing with Brother Ju's words. Eunuch Chao, you must be joking. Feng Bujue laughed. Isn't this an open secret? This question was also a test. Haha, that is true. Chao Xian continued. The King of Hell in Buried Heart Valley has the art of immortality. The news of the Emperor's critical illness could not be hidden. At this time, the commander of the embroidered uniform guards, the deputy of the Governor-General's office, and I all rushed here together. Their purpose is obvious. 2 seconds later, Brother Ju nodded and said, those people in the Jianghu must have heard about this before they acted. Sigh, humans have this problem. Chao Xian shook his head and sighed. The legend of the King of Hell has been circulating in the Jianghu for decades. Many people know about it, but very few believe it. As for those who dare to come here to investigate, you can count them on one hand. He paused for a few seconds and drank another mouthful of wine. But now, once the Emperor's secret edict was released, the soldiers of the imperial court were mobilized, and these people couldn't sit still. Suddenly, they all believed it and came. He smiled. But what about the reality? Regarding the art of immortality, the Emperor himself only believed 30% of it. To put it bluntly, he knew that he was about to die and wanted to make a last resort. That's why he issued the secret edict. Eunuch Chao. Feng Bujue heard this and laughed mockingly. Your words are treasonous. 9 generations of your family will be executed. Chao Xian waved his sleeves. Why would I care about that? He looked up at the sky. If it wasn't to repay the previous emperor's appreciation and kindness, I would have left the imperial court long ago. Who in this world can stop me? He drank another mouthful of wine. As for the execution of 9 generations of my family, I'm a eunuch. When I entered the imperial palace, I was already alone. After entering the imperial palace, it's impossible for me to have any descendants. If you want to execute someone, go for those who have acknowledged me as their godfather and godgrandfather. Most of them are treacherous people who want to curry favor with those in power. One less is one less. Then, Feng Bujue heard this and roughly understood Chao Xian's position. He asked, Eunuch Chao, what do you think and plan about the current situation in the valley? Plan? What do I have to plan? Chao Xian asked back. If I had a plan, would I come here alone to drink wine and admire the spring? Alliance Master Yuan and those martial artists are here to kill and steal the technique. Hua Jian reminded him. Aren't you afraid that the imperial court's troops will be wiped out by them? Chao Xian heard this and glanced at Hua Jian. Then, he revealed a meaningful smile. Miss, you seem to have underestimated someone. Hua Jian was puzzled. Who? Chao Xian's answer was very unexpected. Yuan Qi. Alliance Master Yuan? Hua Jian asked again. She had just learned the full name of the Alliance Master of Wulin. Yes, Chao Xian replied. It sounds like, Eunuch Chao, you seem to know something? Feng Bujue heard more information from Chao Xian's words. Yes. I know a lot, Chao Xian replied. Eunuch Chao, then can you let us know? Feng Bujue asked with a smile. Chao Xian muttered. It's too boring to just say it like this. After that, he walked down from the stone pond. Everyone, follow me. I'll bring you to watch a good show. At the same time, in another part of Buried Heart Valley. At this time, Alliance Master Yuan had led the martial artists along the main road for a long time. Along the way, they had been attacked by more than 10 little ghosts. Although there was a godly person like Yuan Qi, it was inevitable that there would be casualties. After all, there were hundreds of them moving together, and the terrain of Buried Heart Valley was very complicated. There were mountains, rocks, forests, valleys, and water. Moreover, it was shrouded in light and fog. If the little ghosts in the valley wanted to set up an ambush, it would be a piece of cake. Moreover, the residents of Buried Heart Valley were all tough fighters. Many of them were first-class figures in the Jianghu before they entered the valley, and after they entered the valley, their martial arts improved even more. Someone like Song Wuqi was basically a nobody in the valley, and there were many people who were more powerful than him. Being ambushed repeatedly by such a group of people, it was impossible for them not to lose at least 1 or 2 people. Alliance Master. The total number of casualties from all the sects is more than 100 people. If this continues, I'm afraid. The person who spoke was called Jining. He was the descendant of Ji Tong, the head of Octagon Tower. He was also the current head of Octagon Tower. His mastery of the supreme mantra of 8 directions was a few notches below that of his ancestors, but in terms of martial arts, he could still be considered an outstanding talent among the masters of the sect around him. This is a good chance to explain the world, so I'll give you a brief introduction. After the sword competition in Chonglin, the structure of the Jianghu in this world changed greatly. The original ranking of 1 residence, 2 towers, 3 sects, 4 clans was completely overturned. After that incident, the Yi family suffered a great loss, and they never recovered from it. At least in the past few decades, the Yi family did not have another expert who could be mentioned in the same breath as the old head of the family, Yi Qing. Even those who had reached the level of the 6 flowery blades could not be found. Therefore, Thousand Dawn Spire and Octagon Tower rose to the top, and they became the 2 strongest forces in the Jianghu. As for the 3 sects and 4 clans, it could be summed up as declining in the process of inheritance. Just like what the blind man who taught Yuan Qi said. Many people knew how to teach but did not learn, and some knew how to learn but did not teach. The tradition of seniority in the Jianghu was deeply rooted, and there was no lack of conflicts between the same generation. This resulted in the leader of the Jianghu not being the one with the highest talent or kung fu in the Jianghu. Of course, it did not mean that the one with the highest talent was the most suitable to be the leader, but in the matter of passing down kung fu, that was the key. Unless there was a prodigy who could revive the Jianghu, otherwise, as the tradition continued, the kung fu would deteriorate with each generation. In any case, this pattern was maintained for more than 20 years. It was not until 15 years ago, when Yuan Qi, who had practiced Fengchen Xiangong for 5 years, made a name for himself in the Jianghu, that the situation in the Jianghu changed again. Another 5 years passed, and Yuan Qi had become a hero who stood above all the other sections. In terms of character, he was impeccable, and when he fought against the evil, he was able to defeat thousands of soldiers alone. Most importantly, his kung fu was invincible. The invincible here was naturally limited to the Jianghu and not the imperial court. Therefore, Yuan Qi naturally became the leader of the Jianghu. That was the general change in this scenario over the past few decades. Tower Master Ji. Yuan Qi heard what Jining said and replied in a low voice, "Are you afraid of the battle?" "No, no, no. Where did that come from?" Jining denied it verbally, but internally, he was very anxious. Since Octagon Spire was at the front, according to the ratio, the number of disciples who died was quite high. But I think this action is a bit inappropriate. Tower Master Ji is right, and I think so too. The next second, a few leaders gathered around Jining and agreed. Looks like Ruo Yu's earlier deduction was spot on. When the situation changed, these fellows, for their own benefit, they would start to side with those who were not. Based on my humble opinion, we should choose a few people with suitable kung fu from the various sects, and spread them out as scouts to test the enemy. That's right, this way we won't be constantly attacked. That's right, Leader Yuan, the enemy is in the dark and we're in the open. All right, there's no need to say any more. How could Yuan Qi not understand what they meant? He was no longer the third-rate person he was 20 years ago. He was much more scheming and shrewd than the people around him. Since all the sect masters have the same idea, then let's do as you say. After Yuan Qi said that, he thought for a moment and prepared to turn around to pass on the message. Unexpectedly, at that moment, ha 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 ha, a bunch of snakes and rat. You can't be driven away, and now you want to fight among yourselves. What a joke. A loud voice suddenly rang out. It was a voice that used inner energy to send a message, mocking the hundreds of martial artists. Apart from the literal meaning of his words, there were two other messages. Firstly, I'm not here to ambush you, I'm here to confront you head-on. Secondly, Yuan Qi, I can even hear the conversation between you and the people around you. My power, you should consider it yourself. As soon as he finished speaking, they saw the light fog that shrouded everyone's heads rapidly surged into the air, as if it was being sucked up by an invisible force. In an instant, the martial artist's field of vision widened by several times. They soon realized that they were standing in a dangerous gorge surrounded by mountains on three sides. Humph. You don't want to take the road to heaven, but you want to come to hell. After a few breaths, a second voice spoke using inner energy. Since you've come to this broken soul gorge, then you should all stay here. Along with this death announcement, a large number of figures emerged from the mountain paths and stone passes on the three sides. There were more than 100 people. These people stood in the shadows of the high ground, watching the crowd in the gorge from afar. They were like a group of evil spirits that had their eyes on their prey, ready to make a move. There are a lot of people coming this time. Yuan Qi saw the situation, but his expression did not change. It's good that they're here. At this point, his right hand moved. Then, a soft sword was pulled out from the belt on his waist and hung down from his hand. I want to see. Yuan Qi used a cold gaze and a murderous tone to shout at the group of ghosts in the high ground, tonight, in this broken soul gorge, will it be a human or a ghost? Chapter 1042. The mist rose rapidly, and the murderous intent filled the air. In the broken soul gorge, there was a rain of blood. The ghosts in the gorge and the people in the gorge began to fight after a short confrontation. At this time, although the martial artists had suffered more than 100 casualties, there were still nearly 300 of them left. On the other hand, there were only slightly more than 100 exiles in Buried Heart Valley. At first glance, it seemed that the former was more advantageous. However, the number of people was not the most important factor in determining the outcome of the battle. This was because this was a martial arts battle, not a battle between armies. If this was a battle between armies, the factors that determine the outcome of the battle would be the number of people, the formation, the quality of the soldiers, the terrain, and the use of crossbows and firearms. However, in a martial arts battle, these factors were of little value. The sect leaders and disciples of the various sects were not well-trained soldiers. Although in terms of individual combat ability, They were definitely much stronger than ordinary soldiers, but they were divided into dozens of factions, each fighting for themselves. Moreover, they had almost no ability to coordinate with each other. Not to mention people from different sects, even within the same sect, there might not be many people who could coordinate with each other. To put it simply, each of them had their own trumpet and each of them had their own tune. On the other hand, although the ghosts under King Yenlua's command were not very cooperative, they had a great advantage in terms of terrain. They were surrounded from top to bottom, and naturally, they could fight with twice the result with half the effort. In addition, their martial arts were top-notch, so it was natural for them to gain the upper hand. Soon, dozens of cannon fodders from the various sects were killed in the encirclement. On the other hand, only a few of the experts from Buried Heart Valley suffered minor injuries. However, as soon as Yuan Qi made his move, the situation changed instantly. Alliance Master Yuan dashed out. With a flick of his wrist, the sword in his hand immediately shot out like a living thing. This sword was a soft sword. To be more precise, it was a cloth sword. Cloth, it was an ordinary cloth. He was an extraordinary person. Before the age of 30, Yuan Qi did not know how to use a sword. In fact, he did not know how to use any kind of weapon at that time. But after the age of 30, his body had the power of profound arts. Once he had this kind of near-perfect inner strength as a foundation, no matter what kind of weapon or move he practiced, it would all be at his fingertips, advancing 1,000 miles in a day. Therefore, Yuan Qi, who was 30 years old, learned many martial arts and gradually became proficient in all 18 types of weapons. There were some martial arts that he could make stronger than someone who had trained for many years just by looking at it once. After the age of 40, Alliance Master Yuan rarely used weapons anymore. The only weapon that was always by his side was this cloth sword that was embedded in his belt. There was a saying, a sharp sword is unintentional, but a flexible sword is unpredictable. Under the control of Yuan Qi's unfathomable inner energy, the flexible sword was sometimes as fierce as a dragon, sometimes as cunning as a snake, sometimes as vicious as a flood dragon, and sometimes as strong as a python. In the blink of an eye, nearly 10 people had already died under his sword, and every single one of them had been struck in the neck with a single strike. Their heads had been separated from their bodies. Humph! At this moment, a cold snort was heard, followed by a burly figure. I've heard that Alliance Master Yuan's skills are unparalleled in the world. Now that I've seen you today, you are indeed extraordinary. The person who spoke was a burly man with a curly beard. His figure was like an arhat, and he held an 8-ringed broadsword in his hand. Listening to his voice, there was no doubt that he was the first person who had shouted using his inner energy not long ago. Great Desert Saber King, Diho. Yuan Qi stared at him and spoke in a deep voice. Diho smiled. Alliance Master Yuan actually recognizes me? I'm really flattered. Actually, the reason why Yuan Qi recognized Diho was very simple. Because they were of similar age, and belonged to the same generation in the Jianghu, they had met several times in the Jianghu. However, at that time, Diho was already the great Desert Saber King whose name shook the Jianghu, and Yuan Qi was still a nobody. Therefore, the latter remembered the former, and the former didn't even know of the latter's existence. Ha! Ha 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 ha! Yuan Qi heard Diho's words and laughed out loud. Diho didn't know what he was laughing about, and the people who saw this scene didn't know what he was laughing about either. Only Yuan Qi himself knew how ironic and ridiculous the other party's words were. Saber King D. After laughing for a while, Yuan Qi's expression turned cold. I remember before you escaped to Buried Heart Valley, you were the commander of the Great Desert 8 Saber Association? That's right, I was. When Diho answered this question, he was somewhat puzzled. He didn't understand why Yuan Qi would talk about the past with him at this time. Do you remember how many disciples you had under you? Yuan Qi continued to ask. About 500 to 600. Di-ho answered casually. Why are you asking this? Can you tell me the names of 20 of them? Yuan Qi asked again. Alliance Master Yuan. What do you mean by this? Di-ho decided not to answer these strange questions. You can't, Yuan Qi said coldly. But you can say my name. He looked around him. And the names of all the first-rate experts here. Di-ho was silent. He wanted to hear what Yuan Qi had to say. Everyone in the world is like that. You never remember those mediocre people because all you see is fame, martial arts, looks. Yuan Qi seemed a little agitated when he said this. Your eyes can only see those things, so much so that you've neglected people themselves. He paused. That's why I'm laughing. I'm laughing because you're like a bunch of blind people. You're even more blind than a real blind person. Alliance Master Yuan, forgive me for not understanding what you're saying, Di-ho said as he raised his saber. I'm not here to listen to your deliberately mystifying words. That's true. Yuan Qi closed his eyes. People like you won't understand. He raised the cloth sword in his hand. You're just here to die. If you want to come, then come. Di-ho had come without him saying anything. The great Desert Saber King lived up to his name. The 8-ringed saber in his hand was a unique weapon that had been custom-made by a famous craftsman. The saber weighed more than 40 kilograms. There were 8 rings on the back of the saber, and the blade was like a shark's teeth. In the past, countless famous martial artists had died without a complete corpse under this saber. It was enough to be called a terrifying weapon. As for Di-ho, he was also a genius of the saber sect. He was born with superhuman strength. At the age of 12, he could wield a 40-kilogram glaive. He also had a high understanding of saber technique. At a young age, he had mastered all the techniques and formed his own path. At the age of 15, Di-ho became the youngest saber wielder of the Great Desert 8 Saber Association, similar to the position of a cadre among delinquents. You can imagine the exact rank for yourself. At the age of 28, he became the chief of the 8 sabers. However, at the age of 30, he encountered a bottleneck in his saber technique. Under impatient practice, he went berserk. After that, he began to kill innocent people and sacrificed the blood of experts to his saber. Not long after, he became the public enemy of the martial arts world and was forced to escape to Buried Heart Valley. Almost 20 years had passed. As one of the most experienced escapees in the valley, Di-ho had naturally broken through his bottleneck. His current martial arts realm was comparable to the 2 masters of the martial arts world, Thousand Dawn Spire and Octagon Spire. In the blink of an eye, Di-ho's figure flashed to Yuan Qi's side with a shout. His 8-ringed saber slashed down like a bolt of lightning. His saber was heavy, but it was fast. It was so fast that it was almost invisible to the naked eye. However, Yuan Qi could see it. Not only could he see it, he could see it very clearly. Too slow, too clumsy. This was Yuan Qi's evaluation of his opponent. It was also the last sentence Di-ho heard. In the next second, Di-ho's head left his body, and his saber hit empty air. Indeed, Di-ho was a first-rate expert. Among the people present, there were probably no more than 10 who could withstand his saber. However, in Yuan Qi's eyes, Di-ho's saber technique was far from perfect. From the perspective of martial arts realm, Yuan Qi's saber technique was on top of the ultimate move and ultimate transformation. As long as one was still under the ultimate move realm, even if they trained their inner strength to the same level as Yuan Qi, they would at most be able to fight evenly with him. For someone like Di-ho, whose inner and outer strength were much weaker than his, he could not be considered an opponent at all. Alliance Master Yuan's skills are unparalleled. Everyone, follow Alliance Master and kill. The people from the nearby gangs saw Yuan Qi kill Di-ho in seconds and took advantage of the opportunity to shout, boosting the morale of the Wulin faction. Yuan Qi did not disappoint his comrades. He immediately displayed a set of superb qinggong and flew out like a dragon. Wherever he went, the corpses of the people in the valley would be left behind. Where is he? Yuan Yu's heart was as calm as still water amidst the chaos of battle. As he slaughtered, he pondered, "It's impossible for these people to raise the fog. There must be a special person among them. That person's skill is so strong that he can guide the air current. I have to find him from the shadows." While he was thinking, he had already killed dozens of people, which was more than the total number of people killed by the other gangs. After the difference in numbers was widened, the situation of the battle between the two sides was reversed. The Wulin members still had more than 200 people who could fight, while Buried Heart Valley only had about 30 people left. In this way, no matter how advantageous the terrain was, it was useless. The encirclement had evolved into a counter-encirclement. Even if the people in the valley were skilled in martial arts, when one person was surrounded by 5 or 6 people, the result was self-evident. In the time it took to drink a cup of tea, the Death Valley was already littered with corpses. Blood fell like rain and dispersed like fog, taking away the souls of the dead. Just as the ghosts in the valley were about to be wiped out, the person who had raised the fog finally appeared in everyone's sight. "I didn't expect." This person's voice attracted everyone's attention as soon as he opened his mouth. "To think there's someone with such superb martial arts in the world other than the King of Hell." Although it was the same internal energy transmission, the effect was different depending on the speaker's skills. For example, Di Ho and Feng Er, who were the second to speak before the battle, had already taken their lunchbox by now. When they used their internal energy to transmit their voices, their pitch was higher and their voices were louder. This way their qi could carry their words out and let the people in the distance hear them. However, the speaker's tone and voice sounded casual. Among the Wulin members present, Yuan Qi was the only one who could do this. It was obvious that the speaker's internal energy cultivation was very high. "Finally, you're willing to show yourself?" Yuan Qi raised his head and looked in the direction of the voice. It was on top of a mountain 100 meters away. At this moment, an ordinary-looking old man dressed like a farmer was standing there with his hands behind his back. It wasn't long before some people in the crowd recognized him, and this caused a wave of panic to arise. Emo, it's him. He's not dead yet?" The former leader of the demon sect. Doing, Yuan Qi knew this name, but he had never seen this person before. 12 years ago, Yuan Qi had seen a leader of the demon sect, but it was not Doing. That year, the leader of the demon sect, Lu Xiangru, thought that he had achieved great success in martial arts and was invincible in the world. Therefore, he launched a large-scale attack on all the Wulin sections. As everyone knew, the righteous people in the martial arts world had a habit, and that was when the situation was unfavorable to them, they would always find a reason to outnumber them and beat them up. As for the reason, everyone was well aware of it, of course. There was no harm in repeating this classic line here. When dealing with these evil people, there was no need to talk about justice in Wulin. In short, that year the demon sect was wiped out. And the biggest hero in this event, you guessed it right, was Yuan Qi. Lu Xiangru did not know where this guy with the surname Yuan came from. Although Yuan Qi was recognized as a first-class master at that time, he was too unknown in the past, so no one knew the limit of his martial arts. It was not until he single-handedly killed Lu Xiangru that the Wulin sects realized that this person seemed to have been seriously underestimated, and that event became the key factor for Yuan Qi to become the chief of the Wulin alliance. However, if he were to compare Doing to Lu Xiangru, the difference was like night and day. According to seniority, Doing was Lu Xiangru's uncle, but he was a few years younger than Lu Xiangru. He was only in his early 60s. Lu Xiangru practiced the martial arts until he was 48 years old, but Doing had mastered it when he was 30 years old. After that, Even the guardians of the demon sect did not know how powerful his martial arts were. Fortunately, although Du Ying was a martial arts genius, he did not like to fight. Therefore, when he was the chief of the demon sect had always maintained the style of not offending people if they did not offend them. When he was 43 years old, Du Ying was tired of the disputes in the sect, so he angrily passed the position of the chief to the ambitious Lu Xiangru. Then he left in a huff, and no one could find him since then. Who would have thought that Du Ying would actually appear in Heartgrave Valley on this very day? Chief, Jining recognized this person. He hurried forward, wanting to warn Yuan Qi. But Yuan Qi waved his hand, interrupting Tower Master Ji. A few seconds later, Yuan Qi raised his head, and used the same method as Du Ying, to send a message with his internal strength. Du Ying, I have heard of you. It's great that you are still alive. Chapter 1043. The Kung Fu that Du Ying practices is a divine Kung Fu passed down by the leader of the demonic sect, Breathless Kung Fu. Chao Xian looked at the battle in the Death Valley from afar and explained to the 4 players beside him. The name of this Kung Fu sounds ordinary, but it is actually a very profound martial art. If one can master this Kung Fu, his inner energy will be like a raging river, endless. The practitioner can move for 3 days and 3 nights with just a breath of Dantian Qi. It sounds a bit like Wudong's Black Tortoise Kung Fu, Feng Bujue added. No, it's not even close, Chao Xian denied. Black Tortoise Kung Fu focuses on Kung Fu. It's as subtle as a tortoise, calming the mind and condensing the mind. It's obviously a Taoist Kung Fu. As he spoke, he pointed at Du Ying in the distance. The breathless Kung Fu that Du Ying practices is a genuine demonic sect Kung Fu. This Kung Fu requires the practitioner to reverse the flow of his meridians and send his mind out. To seize the fortune of heaven and earth, he can use the qi outside his body for his own use. Hearing this, Hua Jian, who was quite familiar with wuxia, asked, reversing the flow of his meridians, won't it be dangerous? Of course it is. Chao Xian smiled. Logically speaking, those who reverse the flow of their meridians will suffer from internal and external damage, suffer from qi deviation, or explode and die. So it will drop. Xiao Tan widened his eyes and said. Chao Xian did not answer him. Instead, he continued, most of the demonic sects Kung Fu deviates from the orthodox, and many of them go against the traditional Kung Fu. Therefore, the orthodox people consider them as demonic Kung Fu and demonic Kung Fu, and they slander and despise them. He smiled disdainfully. Humph! But in reality, those who can create such demonic Kung Fu are the real prodigies. I agree with that, Feng Bujue added. Hearing that, Chao Xian glanced at him. His eyes seemed to say, Master Feng, are you praising yourself? 2 seconds later, Eunuch Chao continued, if a type of martial arts can only make the person who practices it go berserk or explode, then who would still practice it? To put it bluntly, it was still a problem with people. Because the people who created those martial arts were too talented, the martial arts they created could only be practiced by those who were very talented. However, in this world, there were still many people with average talent. Especially those so-called righteous people. 8 or 9 out of 10 of them are pedantic and stupid people. They especially like to be complacent. If a martial art like the breathless technique were to fall into their hands, it would naturally be something that would only lead to qi deviation. Then, Ruo Yu asked, what realm has Du Ying's breathless skill reached? Chao Xian picked up the wine pot hanging at his waist and took a sip. He replied, about 30 years ago, Du Ying reached the 8th level of this Kung Fu. In terms of qi alone, there was only one person in the world of martial artists who could compare to him. Xiao Tan immediately added, that person must be you, Eunuch Chao? Of course not, Chao Xian replied. As I said, there was only one person in the world of martial artists who could compare to him. I didn't include the people from the government or the palace masters. Then, Hua Jian asked, who is that person? Is it Yuan Qi? Ha! Chao Xian laughed. At that time, Yuan Qi was just a small fry. How could he be compared to the leader of the demon sect? He didn't wait for the other to ask. After a slight pause, he said, 30 years ago, in the world of martial artists, the only person who could beat Du Ying in terms of qi was Yama. Speaking of which, who is this Yama? Feng Bujue followed up with a question. Well, I'll tell you when I meet him. Chao Xian didn't answer. It seemed that it was not the right time to ask questions. Don't interrupt me. I'm only halfway through. He shook his head and continued, according to legend. There are 10 levels of breathless kung fu, but the 10th level, breathless heaven and earth, is not recorded in writing. Only the first leader of the demon sect, who created this kung fu, mastered it. After he died, only 9 levels of breathless kung fu were passed down. In the years after that, the demon sect did produce some talents, but they all stopped at the 8th level, breathless mountain and mountain. So, over time, they believed that the 8th level was the end of the kung fu. Judging from Eunuch Chao's tone, Feng Bujue's expression changed slightly. Du Ying has probably surpassed that level, hasn't he? Yes, Chao Xian replied. In the world today, there are 3 people who have mastered the 9th level of breathless kung fu, and Du Ying is one of them. What the? I thought no one would be able to master it for many years. But now there are 3 people who have mastered it? Xiao Tan gasped in shock. Ha ha! Feng Bujue laughed. Since Eunuch Chao said in the world today and not in the martial arts world today, I'm sure Eunuch Chao has a place among the 3, right? Master Feng, you're really smart. Chao Xian praised his brother Bujue, which was a tacit admission. 2 seconds later, he continued unhurriedly. 15 years ago, the demon sect fought with the martial arts world of the Central Plains. The last leader, Lu Xiangru, was killed by Yuan Qi, and almost everyone in the demon sect was killed. Fortunately, some of them managed to survive. Since there was no place for them in the martial arts world, they decided to seek refuge with the imperial court. The breathless kung fu was a gift they gave to the brocade guard. Huh! Xiao Tan couldn't help but interrupt. How did you get something that was given to the brocade guard? Ha ha! Chao Xian replied. At first, it did fall into the hands of the brocade guard, and Shangguanxi, the commander of the brocade guard, secretly practiced it for a few months. Until one day, when I saw him outside the palace, I vaguely felt that the vital energy in his body was in disorder. When I probed further, I realized that he was on the verge of qi deviation, so I gave him a few pointers. 3 days later, he voluntarily gave me the breathless kung fu and admitted that his talent was limited, so he asked me to kindly accept it. Oh, this Lord Shangguan sure knows how to play, Feng Bujue complained. When he realized that he couldn't practice it anymore, he came to borrow the flower to offer it to the Buddha. He's a smart man, Chao Xian said. He knows that some things can be kept even if they're useless, but some things have to be sold as soon as possible if they can't bring him any benefits. Otherwise, it'll bring disaster. At this point, Chao Xian turned his gaze to Yuan Qi. By the way, speaking of smart people, there's another one here. You mean Alliance Leader Yuan? Hua Jian was the first to react. Yes, Chao Xian replied. Yuan Qi is a person who deserves everyone's respect. Ho! Feng Bujue's tone changed. He received such an evaluation from Eunuch Chao? Looks like that Yuan Qi must be very talented. Very talented? Chao Xian laughed. Haha, no, his talent in all aspects is mediocre. But it is because of that, he deserves our respect. Just as the underworld frontline was getting all kinds of information from the NPCs, the situation at the Death Valley changed. After a short standoff, Dewing leaped down from the high ground. The people in the valley, who were at a disadvantage, took this opportunity to escape from the encirclement and retreated to where Dewing was. After several breaths, Dewing landed on the ground. The place where he landed did not even raise a speck of dust. This level of celestial cultivation made the leaders of many sects suck in a cold breath. Alliance leader Yuan. After Dewing landed, he ignored the people around him and only looked at Yuan Qi. I've heard so much about you. Even though Dewing was dressed like a normal farmer, the presence of an expert on him was even more powerful than before. The presence that came out of his mouth was like a mountain that was as deep as the abyss. The simple sentence that came out of his mouth felt like it weighed a ton. Mr. Du, Yuan Qi did not refer to Dewing as leader, and he did not call him by his name. Instead, he found a more polite way to address him. Technically speaking, I should call you senior. Even though he said that, Yuan Qi did not act like a junior. He still held the sword in one hand and placed the other behind his back as he spoke. Alliance leader Yuan, you're too kind. Du Ying's voice was cold and powerless. I'm just a mountain village man. You're already flattering me by calling me Mr. Du. Very well then. Yuan Qi did not hesitate to drop the pleasantries. Dewing, let's cut to the chase. He asked, are you here to stop us? No, Dewing replied, I'm here to kill you. Humph. Yuan Qi scoffed. There are rules in Buried Heart Valley, Dewing said. You can only come in if the King of Hell allows you to. If the King of Hell doesn't allow you to come in, you have to leave. If the King of Hell wants you dead at midnight, of course. Yuan Qi cut him off. Now that we're here, we don't plan to leave, and we don't plan to die. I know, Dewing said. That's why I'm here to send you off. If you think it's possible, then give it a try. Yuan Qi was not afraid of the other party. He put the soft sword back at his waist and said, as I said, it's a blessing for me that you're still alive. I haven't met an opponent like you for many years. He was not afraid of offending people when he said this because the martial artists behind him had long recognized him as the best in the world. Good. At this moment, Du Ying's expression changed. His reserved aura also burst out in an instant, accompanied by a wave of air that swept forward. Yuan Qi stood proudly with his hands behind his back, unmoved. But the people behind him were in trouble. Those at the level of the sect leader were fine. At most, they staggered back a few steps, but they could still stand firm. But those at the level of disciples and some second-rate figures in the martial arts world fell to one knee, their faces pale. Could it be? This is the legendary Haushikahaki? Well, it could also be Ryatsu. Seeing this scene, Feng Bujue and Wang Tanji, who were watching from the mountain in the distance, complained one after another. And their behavior in exchange for nothing more than Li Ruoyu and Enyuechin's disdainful eyes. Not bad. After seeing this scene, Chao Xian still commented with a calm face. Exerting force from a distance like a tide, this is the biggest difference between the 9th level and the 8th level. If you're at the 8th level, you can only exert force on the front line. He said and took another sip of wine. But he still can't beat Yuan Qi. Hearing this sentence, except for Feng Bujue, the other 3 people in Hell Frontline and the audience watching the live broadcast were all puzzled. Judging from the scene, Dewing seemed to be more powerful than Yuan Qi. After all, his internal force could affect the fog. And Yuan Qi only showed speed and strength in the actual combat, which felt that he was not as good as the former leader of the demon sect. Unexpectedly, at the beginning of the battle, Eunuch Chao said such a statement that seemed to be conclusive. Just as he finished speaking, Yuan Qi made his move. In front of Du Ying's huge internal force, speed and skill were useless. So Yuan Qi's movement was not fast, and he did not use the ultimate soft sword. He just used the simplest way, rushing straight to Du Ying and pointing at Du Ying's dantian. Before the fingertip arrived, the power seemed to be infinite. At that moment, Du Ying's face suddenly showed a look of shock. He thought that no one would confront the 9th level of the breathless art head-on, because this kind of behavior was like hitting the sea with a fist. No matter how strong the fist was, it could only break the waves for a while, but the power of the sea was endless, and the fist would soon be submerged. However, Yuan Qi didn't hesitate to choose the most foolish method. This was because he had seen through it with a single glance. The only weakness of the opponent's seemingly flawless cultivation technique was also its strongest point. This is ridiculous. After the shock, Du Ying's heart was filled with anger. A man who did not like to fight, and he was over 60 years old, shouldn't have this kind of emotion. If a normal person was like that, someone like Du Ying should be even more so. But at this moment Du Ying was angry. When a martial artist found that the level that he had spent his whole life to reach was broken by a junior that he met for the first time, of course, he would be angry. The breathless art was indeed a very powerful martial art, and so was the destiny mysterious art. In the long run, as long as the martial artist practiced the destiny mysterious art for a long time, his internal force would definitely be stronger than the breathless art. But in reality, at least within 30 years, the 9th level of the breathless art would be stronger than the destiny mysterious art. But a stronger martial art did not mean that one would win. Human beings were the key to victory. Du Ying was talented, and his breathless art was stronger than Yuan Qi's mysterious art, but he had not been in a real battle for many years. Even before he left the Jianghu, he had not been in many fights because his enemies would be crushed by his internal force before they could even make a move. On the other hand, Yuan Qi's combat experience was incomparable to anyone else's. When he first entered the Jianghu, even 3 to 5 bandits could have taken his life. Before he was 30, Yuan Qi had been through hundreds of fights of life and death, big and small, because even the weakest of opponents could have killed him. Later on, as his martial arts improved, the opponents he encountered became stronger and stronger. If one had to compare, Yuan Qi was a man who had fought his way from street fights to the world boxing champion. To put it bluntly, in terms of fighting, Du Ying was far inferior to him. Chapter 1044. Yuan Qi made a move, and the energy from his fingertips swirled toward Du Ying. It was true that using a fist to attack a wave could only destroy one point in the wave, but sometimes victory depended on that point. Even though Du Ying had a vast amount of internal energy, he was powerless against the attack and defense of this point Qi. With a soft whistle, the internal energy of Destiny's star shot out from his fingertips. At the last moment, Du Ying retracted the internal energy of silent Qi to protect his gate of life. However, the effect of this move was to prevent him from dying on the spot. Du Ying's name had the character Ying in it, but that did not mean he would win. The winner was Yuan Qi. Yuan Qi's talent was average, but he had developed his own fighting style through countless battles. No matter what kind of opponent or skill he encountered, he could see through his opponent's weakness almost instantly. And this was the real treasure that allowed him to stand at the top of the martial world. To be honest, after the first move, Yuan Qi said calmly, "I am very disappointed." Before he finished, the way he looked at Du Ying had changed. It was the way he looked at other people. A person like you, no matter how talented you are, should not practice martial arts, and you should not leave your name in the martial world. He paused. Because you lack the most basic fighting spirit that a martial artist should have. Ha! Hearing that, Du Ying smiled bitterly. At this moment, his Dantian Qi gate was broken, and his internal energy was in a mess. The seemingly endless internal energy had all dissipated, and he would not be able to use his martial arts for a while. Knowing that he was a lamb waiting to be slaughtered, Du Ying was no longer angry. He replied with relief, "You have no choice in the martial world. If I had a choice from the beginning, I would not have stepped into the martial world. Unfortunately, by the time I could choose, I was already the cult master of the demon cult. A choice? Yuan Qi looked at him coldly. What choice did you make? To live in seclusion and leave the martial world, Du Ying replied. No, that's not right, Yuan Qi denied. Not right? Du Ying asked. Something's not right, Yuan Qi said as he lifted his eyes to look at the 30 people behind Du Ying. You are no different from these people who were forced to escape into Buried Heart Valley. You think you have abandoned your past by coming here, but it is the exact opposite. It is because of your past that you are trapped here. It doesn't matter if you came here to live in seclusion, flee for your lives, or for any other reason. In the end, you're just deceiving yourselves. At this point, Yuan Qi had already raised his palm, preparing to send Du Ying on his way. Where there are people, there is a martial world. If you really want to quit, then go to hell and meet the real King Yanluo. With that, he struck out with his palm. Yuan Qi had only used 20% of his strength in this attack. It seemed like he wanted to leave his opponent's corpse intact. Du Ying had already accepted his fate. He waited silently for this not-so-powerful palm strike to land on his head. However, at this moment, a saber radiance suddenly flashed and struck Yuan Qi's right arm like lightning. At that moment, Yuan Qi's face was filled with shock. What's going on? Alliance Master Yuan thought to himself. Such a powerful saber radiance. It's not from inner energy? As he thought about it, he quickly pulled back his hand and retreated. Then, he looked at the sky cautiously. A few seconds later, the people of Buried Heart Valley and the martial world, who were standing on both sides, were also shocked. They all looked up in the direction where the saber radiance came from. The first thing that appeared in their eyes was white. It was as white as snow. The white robe fluttered in the wind. Then it was red. It was as red as blood. The blood cherry blossoms on the white robe swayed in the wind. After a while, a beautiful figure landed on the ground. At this moment, what everyone saw was still white and red. Her snow-white skin and alluring beauty caused everyone's gaze to be fixated on her. At this moment, everyone present was stunned. Every one of them was very sure that they had never seen this heroine in their lives, because if they had, they would definitely remember her. Therefore, a question appeared in everyone's mind. Who was she? Who are you? Yuan Qi was the first to recover from his shock. It had to be said that Alliance Master Yuan's state of mind was much higher than the other people around him. Even though he was shocked by Su Huaishang's beauty, he would not waver just because of a beautiful woman in front of him. Su Huaishang. Su Huaishang reported her name. Mississippi. Yuan Qi stared at her. I have never seen you before and I have never heard of your name. He glanced at the saber mark on the ground and continued, I wonder, why did you interfere in the fight between me and Du Ying? Su Huaishang's answer was concise. We are under the orders of the King of Hell. When she said, I'll wait, Red Cherry's other 3 members, Blood Rose, Hyacinth, and Tai Haitang, descended from the sky one after another and stood on the same side as their captain. To take your lives. After she said the second half of her sentence, Su Huaishang moved. Hong Ying's group of 3 also followed closely behind, instantly attacking. They did not seem to need the help of the people in the valley. With just the 4 of them, they rushed into the enemy formation of more than 200 people. Be careful of the enemy. The next second, Yuan Qi shouted. This was the first time he directly gave an order to the group of heroes in battle, because he knew the 4 opponents in front of him were extremely dangerous. If he didn't say this, the group of people behind him might be killed or injured in an instant. Chi-chi, chi-chi. 2 sabers flashed and the sound of sabers rang out. Su Huaishang strode forward and set Yuan Qi as her first target without hesitation. Yuan Qi's reaction was lightning fast. He immediately pulled out his sword and swung it to meet his opponent's saber. Su Huaishang's saber was very fast. Because she was a player, her physical fitness had long surpassed the limits of a normal human. Previously, when he was fighting the Desert King of Swords, Di-Ho, Yuan Qi could easily dodge the saber and take down the enemy in one hit. But facing Su Huaishang's attack, Yuan Qi chose to block. Just who is she? After one hit, the confusion in Yuan Qi's heart deepened. Based on her appearance, she is at most in her 20s. But this level of mastery is not something a person her age can achieve. Qi. Before Yuan Qi could settle his thoughts, Su Huaishang's saber slashed at him again. Her saber was too fast. When a person's saber was that fast, her saber was omnipresent and omnipresent. If Yuan Qi was not using a cloth saber but a fixed saber, he would have been defeated already. Why? The more Yuan Qi fought, the more shocked he became. He had not experienced this feeling of rolling on the tip of a blade for many years already. Why is it that when she uses such powerful qinggong and saber skills, there is no trace of internal energy? Actually, the answer to this question was very simple, because the player's control over energy was different from theirs. But as an NPC in the scenario, Yuan Qi could not surpass himself to get this answer. Therefore, Yuan Qi, who could not grasp his opponent's style and could not sense the flow of her qi, could only rely on his 5 senses to predict her next move. Considering the difference in physical fitness between both parties, it was only natural that Yuan Qi would be at a disadvantage. On the other hand, the battle between the other 3 members of Red Cherry Blossom had also begun. Their method was barbaric but effective. To put it bluntly, they were shooting at random. Tai Haitang was a player who specialized in marksmanship. The number of guns that she normally carried in her inventory was more than Xiao Ling. At this moment, she, Sanguine Rose, and Hyacinth each took out 2 assault rifles. They aimed at the crowd and began to attack. The Jianghu players recognized the guns, but for these guns that were at least several hundred years ahead of their time, even if they were placed before their eyes, they had no idea how to use them. As a result, in less than 10 seconds, 60 to 70 people had died in shock. Seeing the experts from the various sects falling like wheat, even the people from Buried Heart Valley were shocked. From the bloody holes on their bodies, they concluded that these people should have been killed by some kind of hidden weapon. However, they could not see the trajectory of these hidden weapons. They could only hear the sound of them being fired. Sigh. If Xiao Ling was here, we would have taken down at least one member of Red Cherry Blossom with our sniper rifle, right? At the edge of the mountain, Hua Jian looked down the horizon and sighed. The other members of Red Cherry Blossom will panic due to their fear of the sniper, Roy Yu added. The surrounding NPCs will be our best aid. Once again, Feng Bujue was attacked by a well-founded argument. He narrowed his eyes and replied, "Are you 2 done yet? Are you trying to say that I've made a mistake in my strategy?" "Yes," Roy Yu and Hua Jian replied in unison. "Good." Feng Bujue slapped his thigh. "I'll use my actions to prove that it's the same even without the sniper." After saying that, he did not care about the reactions of his teammates and directly jumped into the valley. Heh, this is going to be interesting. Although Chao Xin did not understand the term sniper, he could understand the context of the people from Underworld Frontline. Therefore, he basically understood what Feng Bujue was going to do. Bang! Feng Bujue, who was in mid-air, used his jeppo and made a loud noise. His action naturally attracted the attention of many people. Of course, these many people were basically people from Buried Heart Valley. The people from Jianghu were all busy at the moment. Basically, 90% of the survivors were covering their heads and running away. Only a few of the more powerful people were using their martial arts to block the bullet. Who is that? I don't know. I've never seen him before. Is he also a reinforcement sent by Yanwang? Not necessarily. Maybe he's also here to challenge the valley. Is there someone who is so good at qigong in the martial arts world? They chatted amongst themselves while Brother Ju took one step after another, using Jeppo to charge at them. When Feng Bujue was only 20 meters above the ground, he suddenly twisted his body and kicked out a green glow at the 3 members of Red Cherry Blossom. By then, the members of Red Cherry Blossom naturally noticed his movement. They instantly split up in 3 different directions to avoid the attack of Renkyaku. They turned their guns around and started to fire at Feng Bujue. You want to hurt me with normal guns? Brother Ju, who was floating in the air, did not even try to evade. Not only that, he stood where he was and mocked them. Obviously, he had absolute confidence that he would be unharmed in the rain of bullets. And the source of this confidence was the 2 pieces of equipment that he was wearing. One of them was his belt, I_1_B_A_ belt. After the accumulation of many scenarios, this growth-type equipment had started to show its true power. When he first got it, the defense of this equipment was slightly weak. But as time passed, with the special effect of every time the equipment was attacked, the defense of this equipment had been nurtured to extremely strong. This was why in the previous match against Blade, Feng Bujue, who was in the form of a child, survived the shield bash from Long Aomin, who was in the form of an adult. Furthermore, he had a second piece of godly equipment, 1320 mean armor. The special effect of nullifying all long-range attacks below strong, combined with the extremely strong defense and the buffering effect, could be said to be the bane of bullet. With Feng Bujue's current defense, only heavy weapons and special bullets would be effective against technological long-range attack. TSK. Why did they have to come out when we're doing the side quest? Seeing that Brother Ju was immune to normal bullets, Bloody Rose came up with a plan and told her teammates, Hyacinth, Haitang, you guys continue with the quest. I'll hold him back. Before she finished, Bloody Rose had already taken out a feather from her inventory and activated her summoning skill. In the white light, a giant eagle materialized. This unforeseen event caused all the NPCs who were looking over to be stunned on the spot. At this moment, most of them had already categorized these men and women who had suddenly appeared as existences of the path of demons or immortals, and had given up on further speculations. Even though your growth-type summoned creature is very powerful. Feng Bujue looked at Bloody Rose on the back of the giant eagle and said, but if you think you can hold me back with your own power, you are too naive. With a shout, he launched Renkyaku Kick again. This time, Brother Ju used the aerial version of Renkyaku Kick, Chain of Wolves. The swift and fierce attacks crisscrossed as they flew toward the giant eagle that was about to soar into the sky. It seemed like there was no way for it to dodge. Unexpectedly, just as Feng Bujue's attack was about to land, a torrent of vital energy came from the side, and it changed the direction of the slashes from Renkyaku Kick, causing them to deviate from their target. After this change, Bloody Rose's giant eagle successfully soared into the sky and hovered at a higher altitude than Brother Ju. Whoa! I didn't come to provoke you, but you took the initiative to seek death. Feng Bujue's expression changed, and he turned to look at Du Ying in the distance. Looks like I'll have to kill you as well. Chapter 1045. Inside the Valley of Lost Souls, the battle was full of twists and turns. Initially, it was the people from the valley who had the upper hand. They had the upper hand in the encirclement. Then, it was Yuan Qi who single-handedly turned the situation around. Then, Du Ying's appearance seemed to have stabilized the situation, but Leader Yuan soon turned the tables around. Just when the people in the valley thought that the battle was over, 4 beautiful women dressed in blood-red robes suddenly descended from the sky. Using strange hidden weapons, they launched an inhumane massacre on the forces of the martial arts world and successfully suppressed Yuan Qi. In other words, be it the people from the valley or the martial artists, they felt like they had been bungee jumping for the past half an hour, and when Feng Bujue showed up, their emotional journey reached its climax as well. Leader Yuan, I will deal with Su Huaishang and the one in the sky. I will leave the two on the ground to you. Before Feng Bujue landed, he had already come up with a plan. He did not waste time and shouted an order to Yuan Qi. Yuan Qi had no idea who Feng Bujue was, and he had no idea where the man had come from, but he had seen the few Renkyaku kicks earlier. At that moment, Leader Yuan thought to himself, since this kid is also a master and he is willing to help me, I have no reason to reject him. After all, I am at a disadvantage now, so I might as well let him try. Okay. 2 seconds later, Yuan Qi replied loudly, Young hero, you have to be careful. Before he left the battle, he purposely reminded his brother Ju because he really thought Su Huaishang would be a tough opponent. If this young hero was killed instantly, that would be too embarrassing. Leader Yuan, please do not worry. To deal with her, I have my own way. When Feng Bujue answered him, he even used his leg to launch a flurry of kicks at Duing, who was far away. The old man was so shocked that he hurriedly channeled his internal energy and retreated to block the attack. By the way, I would like to ask Leader Yuan to send a message to the heroes, to help them suppress Duing and the people from the valley. Brother Ju knew very well that his words might not be effective. The group of martial artists would probably ignore him. Therefore, he had to use Yuan Qi's mouth to give orders. After Yuan Yu heard this, he immediately did some mental calculations and came to the conclusion that this was a good idea. At this moment, Feng Bujue had already leaped into the air. He grabbed a kitchen knife and a military shovel and slashed at Su Huaishang. Su Huaishang swung her twin sabers back and unleashed a series of saber shadows. Not only did she manage to block Brother Ju's attack, she even managed to push Yuan Yu back a few feet. With this exchange, Yuan Qi successfully escaped from the battle. Following that, he immediately followed Feng Bujue's instructions and gave the order to everyone. Without stopping, he charged towards Tai Haitang and Hyacinth. With Yuan Qi's cultivation base, as long as he was prepared, naturally, he would not be injured by bullets. He already had a protective barrier around him. This was why Feng Bujue assigned him to deal with Red Cherry and Hyacinth. When Alliance Master Yuan got close, Hyacinth and Tai Haitang had no choice but to change their strategy to deal with this super-powerful NPC. This way, the martial artists who were being ravaged by gunfire were able to free up their hand. The martial artists who were still alive were basically elites who were at or near the level of a leader. Asking them to deal with the players might be a bit too much for them, but if they were asked to deal with Duing, who had already lost his Qi Gate, and the 30 or so martial artists from the valley, they would at least be able to fight evenly. Therefore, less than 2 minutes after Feng Bujue arrived at Soul-Breaking Gorge, the battle between the two sides changed again. The war tilted in favor of the forces of power in the world of martial artists once more, and a new round of intense slaughter took place. Where are your teammates? After Su Huaishang exchanged blows with Brother Ju, she immediately asked. Even though she was looking forward to dueling with her brother Ju, this was a team battle. As the leader of Red Cherry, Su Huaishang had the responsibility to consider other factors in the battle to prevent herself from falling into the enemy's trap. Humph! Feng Bujue scoffed. What's wrong? Not seeing anyone makes you even more uneasy, right? He did not give a clear answer. Instead, he used an ambiguous attitude to ask a question in order to create more psychological pressure. Oh well. Su Huaishang's expression hardened. I didn't think you would say anything. After that, Su Huaishang's body moved swiftly. In a flash, she had already used the ultimate skill, Flying Swallow Ride, and leaped into the air. Then, with a twist of her slender waist, she turned around and followed up with Northern Heaven Cross Phoenix. At that moment, the phoenix's cry pierced through the sky. The cold red flame came from several meters away and engulfed Feng Bujue completely. But, This kind of combo, I have seen through it a long time ago, Brother Ju commented calmly. At the same time, he leaped into the air and ran against the trajectory of the cross blade. The next second, he was like an octopus sprinting through the water. His head was at the front and his body was at the front. His body remained relaxed, straightened naturally, and even rotated slightly on its own. Feng Bujue used this extremely strange extreme movement to squeeze out from the corner of the cross blade and missed the attack. In this world, there was probably no other person who could use this kind of method to break a combo. Only he, who had zero-time difference calculation and strange thinking, could come up with this idea and execute it. Ha 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 ha! After successfully breaking the combo, Brother Ju rushed to Su Huaishang's side. He laughed arrogantly. The cross blade is so hard to dodge. It's so embarrassing to counter-attack like this. Ping, quang. After a few seconds, two sounds of metal clashing could be heard. The first sound was the sound of Su Huaishang using her left blade to block the blade of Mustbreak. The second sound was the sound of Su Huaishang using her right blade to block the WJQ 308 military shovel. That is rather surprising. Half a second later, Feng Bujue, who had failed to counterattack, said darkly with a chilling expression, "I made my move right before you finished your skill, and you managed to defend yourself in time? Ha! You are quite good at acting." Su Huaishang's eyes flashed with anger. She replied harshly, "Didn't you see through our combo a long time ago?" Just as she finished speaking, a giant shadow rushed down from the sky. That shadow was no doubt the giant eagle that the Blood Rose rode on. And this attack was one of the summoned creature's skills, a silent assault. As the name suggested, the specialty of this skill was that it would not make any noise when it was activated. It would not even cause any vibration or wind pressure in the air. Normally, the target would only notice the attack when the giant eagle was extremely close to them. In actual combat, as long as the Blood Rose cooperated with her teammates, she could often use this skill to take down the enemy in one hit. Of course, Feng Bujue would not be taken away by the Blood Rose. Just as he said earlier, he had seen through this combo a long time ago. Before Su Huaishang's Northern Heaven Cross Phoenix was activated, Brother Ju had already noticed his opponent's intention. This was because he had been paying attention to the Blood Rose's movements in the air. After he escaped from the gap between the slashes, Feng Bujue purposely used his expression and words to mislead his opponent. He wanted to create the illusion that he had been careless. However, Goddess Su was not as simple as she seemed. Based on her experience of fighting with Brother Ju many times, she was careful when she used the slashes. She did not use her full strength. The result was as expected. Her opponent used a very extreme method to pass through the slashes and found a chance to counterattack. This was when Su Huaishang showed her mercy. She did not use her full strength, so she was able to react before her opponent's attack arrived. Unfortunately, the moment she blocked Feng Bujue's slashes and slashes, Su Huaishang realized her opponent did not reveal any flaws. For an expert of Su Huaishang's level, the feeling of being hit by a weapon could give her a lot of information. Therefore, after blocking Feng Bujue's two slashes, she understood. The purpose of these two slashes was not to kill her, but to push her back. In other words, Feng Bujue's series of actions were all done after he saw through his opponent's coordination. Every step that he took looked dangerous, but in reality, it was done with ease, regardless of whether he was using this method to test his opponent's bottom line or to toy with his opponent. This was not a very pleasant combat experience for Su Huaishang. Not bad. Feng Bujue rebounded back 1 feet and barely dodged the giant eagle's attack. No matter how I baited you, you did not reveal any flaws. As he spoke, the giant eagle had already rushed into the ground. Like a ghost that could pass through walls, it silently disappeared into the soil. Summoned creatures could pass through walls, but the Bloody Rose could not. Therefore, when the silent assault was activated, she had already left the giant eagle's back. At this moment, the Bloody Rose was still in the sky. However, she was no longer riding on the giant eagle, but the one in the sky has also summoned the fossilized pterosaur. Is he planning to turn around and attack those NPCs? Feng Bujue said as he looked up at the dragon circling in the sky. Speaking of which, you guys are doing a side quest, right? What is the quest about? Purging the invaders for Hades? Su Huaishang did not answer Feng Bujue's question. In these few seconds, she was using her title skill, Bullet Vision, to observe the situation on the battlefield. Even though it was only a few seconds, it was enough for her to see every detail on the battlefield clearly. Rose. After Brother Ju finished, Su Huaishang immediately shouted at her teammates in the sky, "Cover Hyacinth and Haitang. Retreat." This was the leader's order, so there was no doubt about it. Regardless of whether the decision was right or wrong, as professional players, Red Cherry's players would not question or argue during the competition. What they needed to do was to execute the order perfectly. If there were any questions, they would have to wait until the competition was over. Therefore, the next second, the Bloody Rose controlled the fossilized pterosaur to charge at Yuan Qi. The giant eagle that had burrowed into the ground not long ago also flew up and suddenly appeared between Yuan Qi and Red Cherry's players. Xiong, xiong. Before Yuan Qi could regain his footing, 2 balls of fire came at him from the sky. Thankfully, Guild Master Yuan's Qinggong was impeccable. He used his movement skill to evade the invisible pillars of fire and dodge to the side. However, Hyacinth and Tai Haitang used this opportunity to jump onto the giant eagle's back and soar into the sky with it. What's wrong? Seeing this, Feng Bujue knew that the other party had decided to retreat. It was not realistic for him to chase after 4 people at the same time. Therefore, he decided not to attack. Instead, he looked at Su Huaishang and said, "Aren't you looking forward to fighting me? Are you leaving already?" "We're here to complete the side quest." Su Huaishang replied, "Since we can't do it anymore, then we should retreat as soon as possible to prevent further losses." She paused for a moment. Her beautiful face turned to look at the sky. "Your teammates are on the mountain over there, aren't they?" "So, you found them." Feng Bujue knew the effect of bullet vision, so he did not deny it. "Actually, I couldn't see them clearly. The distance was too far for me." Su Huaishang smiled. "But, after hearing your confirmation, I'm relieved. Looks like my decision was not wrong." Feng Bujue was shocked. "Phew, you tricked me?" There was a subtext behind his words that he didn't say out loud, which was, "And it worked." Ha! Su Huaishang's smile became even more adorable. However, she did not answer Brother Ju's question directly. Instead, she said, "This battle between you and me has been waiting for too long. I'm not in a hurry. If you want to fight, you can come to Heartbreak Villa to fight." Then, Su Huaishang sheathed her sword and leaped into the air. With her ultimate skill, Flying Swallow, she easily swam up the wall and jumped out of the valley. Before her shadow disappeared into the mountain, she turned back to look at Brother Ju with a deep gaze. At that moment, her clothes fluttered in the wind while her beautiful hair fluttered with the wind. When looked at from afar, she seemed like an otherworldly celestial maiden that possessed a valiant and heroic bearing. Even the NPCs were mesmerized by her beauty. "What are you looking at?" 3 seconds later, Feng Bujue roared, "What are you all doing here?" This time, he did not wait for Yuan Qi to speak. Instead, he used the tone of a leader to yell at the group of martial artists, "Kill! Cleanse the ground!" His yell snapped many people out of their daze. Even though they still had no idea who this person was, they had to admit, he had a point. 5 minutes later, the battle at Heartbreak Valley was over. The group of martial artists led by Yuan Qi had suffered almost 200 casualties. Currently, there were 48 survivors. 13 of them had minor injuries. The group from Heartbreak Valley was completely wiped out. Only one person survived without a doubt. That person was Duing. This old man was a playful one. When he heard Su Huaishang say the word retreat, he ran away faster than the members of Red Cherry. Other than Yuan Qi, the other martial arts masters could not stop him. However, Du Ying's mental state was like that of a stray dog. Right now, he was running towards Heartbreak Mountain Villa in a daze. He had many questions in his mind. He wanted to ask the King of Hell. On the other hand, after the dust had settled, Yuan Qi finally arrived in front of Feng Bujue. He bowed politely and said, "On behalf of all the heroes, I, Yuan Qi, thank you for your help." His gaze landed on Brother Ju. "May I know your name and which faction you are from?" You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.